Everything's working all right. I see green. I see 2600 KB per second. So we're probably live. Today, we are continuing, after a long hiatus, Secret of Mana. But this time we're playing via the collection of mana. And we've got Anna.
It's me.
The illustrious author of Tears of a Dragon. Which is a massive fantasy novel.
Awakening.
Yes, Tears of a Dragon Awakening.
It's
Well,
not massive.
it's a much bigger book than I had anticipated, and I'm trying very hard not to just like read ahead. Like whenever I read a physical book, there's this temptation to just go right to the last page and read the last paragraph.
I do that. I absolutely do that. I do that with every single book I read. I go to like the last couple of pages just to see how it ends, because if I hate the ending, then I don't read it.
Oh. And for some books that actually worked against me in the way that the ending happened, like, I believe The Man in the Iron Mask, the ending for that book happened something like 3/4 of the way through. And then what happens at the end of the book is like this long denouement.
See, I started doing that because when I was in like 2nd or 3rd grade, I read this I think I still have it actually. I read this children's book, and it was about this kid who, he and his dog entered this dog sledding race, in Alaska or whatever, in order to win prize money to save their farm or something like that. I think that was the premise.
Yeah.
And it was a really nice story, and like it was cute, blah blah blah, and obstacles and this mean old guy trying to stop him.
All right.
Really sweet.
Okay.
And you're on the last chapter. You've got like 10 pages to go until the end, and they take you through this whole race, and he's getting to the finish line. Oh, and there's this Native American like Indian guy who everyone's really afraid of because he's like super bamf.
He's super what?
A badass motherfucker.
Oh, okay, super bamf.
Super bamf. So the kid is beating this Native American guy who like never loses this race. Like every year, he always wins this race. Like he's the dude. And as the kid and his dog are getting closer to the end and they're gonna win, it happens in like one paragraph. It's like 3 sentences, and those 3 sentences shatter your entire world. Pretty much what happens is that the dog runs so hard, it's a female dog, runs so hard for her owner that her heart explodes.
Oh, wow.
And she dies right before they hit the finish line. Like, just drops dead. And in 3rd grade, that was the most traumatizing thing to read.
Yeah.
So then the Native American dude stops his sled in front of him, like behind them, and like pulls out a musket or something, or a rifle, and turns to all the other racers as they're coming up, and he's like, if any of you try to move past me, I'll shoot you. And so then, because the Native American dude is like guarding the finish line, the little boy, the boy's like 10 or 12, something, he's young. He picks up his dead dog and walks across the finish line with his dead dog, like crying his eyes out.
Yeah.
And and then you got a couple pages left, and it's like, oh, he got the money, and he's living on this. And so I finished this book in the dead of night because I brought it home from school. I rented it out from the library.
Yeah.
Finished this book in the dead of night, crying my eyes out because they murdered this dog. Okay?
Yeah.
Just killed this beautiful, sweet dog that you'd gotten so attached to over the course of this whole book. I walked into my mom's room. She was on the phone with someone. I walked into my mom's room, weeping and wailing and gnashing of teeth. She looks at me and she's like, Anna, what's wrong? I lifted the book up and I said, I'm never reading this again, and I threw it. Like, I threw it across the room.
Yeah.
And I never touched it again. Like, I have it, but I've never read it ever again. I've never reopened it.
Yeah. I mean, they call that tonal whiplash, don't they? Like, when everything seems to be, pretty in line for... like an optimistic, adventure-y kind of thing, and then suddenly death.
So now I read the end of books because if anything terrible happens, or like I hate the ending, then I don't read them.
Yeah.
Just because that one book traumatized me so greatly. I thought I still had it.
It's been a while since I've like actually read a physical book, so I'm trying to. I want to enjoy Awakening as organically as possible. Plus, when you're reading it in electronic format, you actually have to. You can the app only lets you flip the pages one at a time.
I can't do it. It hurts my eyes. I like physical books.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of nice that this app only lets you flip pages one at a time or skip entire chapters, which I don't want to do. I want to, like, when a chapter happens, I want it to happen when it happens, you know?
Yeah. I'm still working on the second one. It's been so long. It's been, like, almost 3 years now. Well, getting on 3 years, and, like, 2.5.
Alright.
And I still haven't finished the second one, and I'm beating myself, but I also work a lot, and I'm stuck.
Yeah.
Like, I'm so stuck, and I've been stuck. So I set it down, and I've been working on a different book for a little bit.
Aha!
Which is something I do often. I flip between projects, so I actually have five different books that I'm writing at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, to me that's pretty reasonable.
From each other. And when I get stuck on one, I hop to the next one.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. I mean, I do the same with my game ideas. Like, I've got a 2D game idea and a 3D game idea, and I'm actually kind of struggling on what particular framework to use for the 2D game idea, because I started out working with Construct, but then like Construct support dropped off, and the guy started blaming hardware for the framework being slow. So I'm like, maybe I should just do this from scratch or do it in Unity or something. And then like Unity 2D support suddenly improved a whole bunch. So maybe I'll do it in that. And then like there's this one other YouTuber called The Happy Cat, except Happy is spelled Happie, and she had like 1 or 2 videos on how to start making your own game development tools. She says game engine, but she really just covers the most basic of basics. And the thing I like about that is that she mentions OpenGL, and I really want to develop for OpenGL. So, I mean, there's a lot of roads open to me, and the hardest part is actually writing the story, because I want the game to feel good enough, like this, like what I'm playing right now, Secret of Mana. The story is I've gone to the Upper Land, and we've just gotten to where the sprite supposedly is from, but the sprite keeps losing its memory and getting its memory back and losing it just on these tiny little bumps to the head. And the story is horrible, but the gameplay is fun.
So how far are you actually in Awakening right now? Where did you...
Let's see, I've taken a break for a while. I want to say chapter 12?
You're so close to the end, oh my god.
Oh, wow. It feels like
there's like 14.
Okay, it feels like I'm in the middle of the adventure.
14.
I feel like I'm in the middle of the adventure because so much stuff has happened, but it feels like there's so much to go too.
See,
and I'm guessing that's...
that's actually surprising to hear, because when I was writing this, when I first started writing this one, it took me like 10 years to finish it.
Okay.
Which would be horrible if it took me 10 more to finish the second. Like I can't do that. That's terrible. But it took me like 10 years because I started writing the first draft ever. I got like 3 paragraphs in, erased it. Next draft, chapter in, erased it. Next draft, 2 chapters in, erased it. I think there was the second to final draft. I got 5 chapters in, read it over again, and I was like, I hate it. Erased it. I kept some of the same character names, right? All the same concepts, same storyline, but character, like appearances, locations, how the story started, completely ripped it all up from the ground, redid it. Didn't take any of the same opening elements.
So you're right from a sort of you're right from the beginning to the end then.
Yeah.
All right. I tend to I write the beginning, the end, and a little bit of the middle, and then I just try to flesh it out.
I have figured out where I kind of want to start and where I kind of want to end up by the beginning and end of each book, but how I get to those points I leave very open, because I'm constantly coming up with new stuff to shove in.
Yeah.
Like, all the time, which it's kind of stressful, because it's like, man, I'm going to end up having to write so many books just to fit this all in. Or I'll do a J.R.R. Tolkien, and I'll write a book that's like 1,000 pages long. I don't know.
Yeah.
Let's see, chapter 12. Let me see here. Why is this page dog here? I don't remember. It's 10.
So you can tell I've been you can tell I've been grinding a bit more actively on this version, because I have 52,000 gold.
Yeah, I guess on an electronic version you wouldn't even really be able to see where you are in relation to the beginning, as opposed to like a physical book.
Yeah. Yeah, you can't really see the side of the book.
End, you can't really see how far away you are.
Yeah, so you can't really look at the side of the book to see how many pages are up and how many pages are down.
Are you at the beginning of 12, or did you finish it? Or like somewhere in the middle?
Now that I don't remember. Let me actually open up my little reader app to see.
In the physical version, chapter 12 begins on page 213. And the actual book itself, the story, not including acknowledgments and the about the author page, ends on 271. So you are within 60 pages of the end.
All right, yeah. It looks like I'm right at the beginning of chapter 12. So, and there aren't even page numbers on the Google Play Books app, unless I can. I mean, it's probably in the settings or something.
Yeah, you have 2 more chapters to go. It's 14 chapters long.
All right.
Well,
but yeah, it's. I mean, I'm probably gonna want to review a bit from the beginning just to make sure I'm clear on everything that's happened up to this point, or I might just read the whole thing through a second time. Just read it through a second time with a clear perspective of, or with an idea of what has happened so far and where the foreshadowing is and stuff like that.
I'm so excited about the second book, honestly, because. Oh shoot! No, I can't say anything. Spoilers.
I mean, I'm happy to know that you're excited, because I mean that's what makes good.
So you kind of meet them, sort of, at the very end of the first book. There's this character that's going to get introduced. Right?
Okay.
And you literally just meet them at the end of the first book. You don't get to know their name or do anything with them. They just are there. You just run into them.
So it sounds like kind of one of those to be continued characters.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So the whole first part of book 2, which is called spoilers, Reborn.
Okay.
The whole premise of the first bit of book 2. I'm not quite sure how many chapters I'm gonna dedicate to this. I'm currently on chapter 2. It was weird. I was writing and I got 46 pages in, and then I was like, oh shoot, I never started chapter 2. Now I have to go back and pick a spot to shove a random chapter heading. Okay. So the first beginning bits of book 2 are literally dedicated to establishing not exactly who this character is, but how they're going to interact with the other people in this world. And that means Oren and Cyrus and Growl, and then also strangers and not so good people and enemies and things like that. And the whole purpose of this is to establish how beneath this character everybody else is.
Okay.
This character is a very weird contrast, right? Because the first chapter in book 2 is I don't remember. I think I titled it either Stronger Than You or The Strongest, and I think I changed it at some point. One of the two. Because this character is literally supposed to be this vamp, pretty much, that nobody else can match up to. And it's to set up this tone of, you have everything that happens in book 1, which is outlandish and out there, and there's gods and goddesses and dragons and this huge big thing that happens in the prologue.
Yeah.
But this is just small snippets. Small snippets.
Just little hints and teases?
Of how grand scale this entire story is.
Alright.
So, like, first chapter, after you meet this character gets into a fight with Growl, right? Growl is this huge bear.
Yes.
He's a big, lightning bear, okay? And this character tosses him like a ragdoll. Like...
It sounds a bit, it sounds a bit like a Dragon Ball introduction.
Gets in a fight with him and just tosses him.
Yeah.
A couple more people die in the beginning of book. Like it seems to be a thing I just inherently do. Like beginning of book 1, people died. Beginning of book 2, people died. But the way that the people die in book 2 is especially disturbing.
Huh.
Because it's literally focused around this new character and how they react with everyone. You know, or how inhuman or how different they are than what has been established as like baseline normal.
Yeah, okay.
Which, because when not really for the other series I've worked on, but this series in particular, this is the first series I ever started working on. And when I first started on it, it was more of like an emotional venting system for me than anything else. So I did a lot of self-insertion.
Yeah, I mean, that's normal.
Yeah.
I think it's actually a very honest way to write. Yeah. Writing from one's own experience. Or deriving from one's own, like, a combination of one's own experience and fantasy.
Yeah. So, like when there's a character death that happens in like the first or second chapter of the first book, you know, I didn't exactly set it up for where you would feel bad. It was just something that happened to push the plot, and it has meaning later on that we haven't quite gotten to yet. But it was just something to push the protagonist into leaving, right?
Mm-hmm,
little spurring action. When the first actual person dies in book 2, it's brutal. Like, it's like there is no big explanation, there's no follow-up, there wasn't any reason for it other than this character just decided they want to kill someone. It doesn't do anything for the plot other than this is how this character is.
Alright.
So, it's...
Like, if you had to give it a...
I mean, when I gave it the ESRB rating for the first one, I rated it for, like, teens to adults. They actually rated it family-friendly.
Oh, okay.
Sort of, which was surprising, because the prologue was graphic.
Yeah, but I mean, like, books that they make you read in high school can get pretty violent or sexual.
Yeah, no, I read, like, there's 2 books I read in high school for IB Lit, and in both of them, the main characters are female, and they get, like, raped and stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, ugh, okay. But, you know, it was bloody. I was kind of surprised that they were like, oh yeah, this is totally fine. It's like,
yeah. The one that sticks in my mind. Well, there's 2. There's the Pigman, which involves an old creepy guy and kids, not necessarily doing anything like particularly bad, but doing things that could be perceived as particularly bad. Just because, like, the old man is weird and just doesn't get visitors and has these certain obsessions and stuff, and the way that he hangs around with these kids makes it look very inappropriate to outsiders.
Yeah.
And then the other one is called, I think, it's either Dream Weaver or Dream Catcher, and the only, like, I don't remember much about it other than it's kind of a journey of self-discovery that ends in, like, everyone killing themselves.
Oh my god.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, that one is really vague, because, like, from what I remember of it, it's sort of a spiritual journey kind of thing. But it's a spirit. But if that's really the case of the book, then it's giving this horrible message that that they end up dying, not just dying, but taking their own lives. But yeah, it's very books that they. I don't know. Maybe it's just books in general, but they seem to be very easygoing on book ratings compared to other media.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it's because they think that people can't imagine stuff that's more graphic than what you see in the movies and video games.
You totally can.
But I don't know, kids' imaginations can get pretty vivid.
Yeah, that's true. So, now I actually want to ask you a couple of questions, because, like, I don't really... It's not... No, I know a couple people personally who've read the book, but most people who, buy this, I'm never going to talk to them or meet them. They're just people who purchased my stuff. But I can talk to you.
Yeah, ask away.
You're not a family member, so I can trust you to be non-partial. So at the beginning, no, not at the beginning of the prologue. I never did it for the prologue. But at the beginning of each chapter, there's like this little snippet of text, like a paragraph or so, that's italicized. I don't know if you remember reading those snippets.
Yeah, a little bit.
A little bit. So, what do you think those are? Like, just as you're reading them, what do you think they are?
I want to say memories of the gods.
Okay.
I mean, that's if I recall, that's like the beginning, the big battle, and then from what happened after, it seems like recordings or. No, actually, I gotta look at them again. Let's scroll back and see. Open up the old book here. Scroll back.
The old book.
The old new book. Oh, it probably doesn't help that these pages are like I'm reading it on my phone, so the pages in the text has to be big enough for me to read, so the pages themselves are smaller. So I'm probably on like if it would be page 200 in a regular size book, this is probably maybe page 500 or 600 in this phone-sized book.
It's terrible. No wonder you think it's so huge. The real book is only like 297 pages.
Let's see, let's skip back to the beginning. Original pages about sharing body's gift, add bookmarks, read aloud. That sounds pretty nice. The ability to just put the phone aside and have it read out to you.
Yeah. I'd fall asleep, honestly.
Let's see. I want to skip forward or backwards through chapters.
You said you're at the beginning of chapter 12, weren't you? There's a paragraph right there.
Yeah, I suppose. Alright, back forward again to chapter 12. I wanted to look at one of the earlier chapters' blurbs, because I might be remembering them wrong.
Let me see if I can find...
I totally forgot that you had actually named a character Ral, because Ral is the name of one of the characters in one of my 3D projects.
Wait, really?
And it was because
awesome.
The project has to do with colors, and I looked up to see if the name Ral was taken anywhere. And actually, what I saw was that that RAL is the name of a color organization in Europe. And I thought, wow, that would make a really good name for a protagonist of a color tactics battle game.
I beat you to it, damn.
Yeah. Well, there's lots of protagonists named Johnny, so I don't see
that. Short for Ralshire, and I think when he first introduces himself, he calls himself... Somebody calls him by his full name somewhere in this book. I don't remember who does it, but it's short for Ralshire. Yeah, so I suppose you can just go to chapter 12, but like
the
snippet at the beginning of chapter 1 says, "On and on I saunter, watching the world as it slides by on granite floors and stone walls, the history of fools and tyrants etched onto corroding surfaces. So many lives linked together, yet they have no knowledge of how important they are to one another, without meeting, without touching. One main character is just another extra in someone else's life, bumping past them in a crowded street. However, this means nothing to me. I am the weaver of tales, I am the teller of stories, and I determine who will die and who will survive."
Yeah, that does sound like the kind of thing that like a god would, either a god or like one of those crazy prophets would say.
So you are part right. These are journal entries.
All right.
They're all from the same person. This is the same person. This is the same point of view. And they're sort of linear. Like, they're sort of in chronological order.
Okay.
Like, the snippet in chapter 2 and 3 follow after the snippet in chapter 1.
Okay.
But then when you get to... Let me find it.
So it seems like the kind of thing that might be better perceived on a second reading then. Like where you might be more apt to skipping forward, ahead, and back, and recapping and stuff.
Yeah. So the snippets in chapter 1 and chapter 3 are in chronological order, but then the snippet in chapter 2 is after chapter 3.
Huh.
So it sometimes, for whatever purpose of the chapters going on, they flip around a little bit, but more or less, they are in chronological order.
All right.
Where they start from varies. So, you know, further on in the chapters, the snippet on like chapter 6, everything following chapter 6 is in chronological order, but chapter 6 hops to a different point in time.
Okay. Actually, that kind of reminds me of just yesterday. I had started playing the new 2016 Doom again, the Bethesda Doom.
Sweet.
And you occasionally find this, like, one thing I really don't like about Bethesda's style in general is that they sometimes seem to cram too much plot. Like, well, the thing I don't like about this Doom game is that there's too much other stuff happening. Too much not Doom stuff happening. And part of that is plot and dialogue and extra characters and and this whole Argent thing. And while you're wandering around, you find these, like, basically things that you need to interact with to move forward, to open doors and move forward. And when you interact with them, like, a wall of text is fed to you. They start telling you, like, read out in biblical style, like, "And lo, the Doomslayer wandered the bloody plains of hell." I'm like, why are you doing this to me? I know what I did. Or, like, maybe the big plot twist is that they're not telling your story, but the story of someone who came before you, or something like that. I don't know. But, like, it's one of those things that you know is going to become important later, like maybe in Doom Eternal, or maybe their third game. But right now it's just meant to be, like, flavor text, right? And, like, I see that in a lot of media, in that there's, like, this something that happens aside, and I tend to glaze over it a bit, because, like, I know it'll be important later, and I can probably go back and read it when it becomes important. I can go back and read that bit when it becomes important. I figured, like, because there was little exposure, you know little about the characters that you see in that initial fight, I was thinking it had to be the chronicles of one of them. And, you know, it'll become later, or it'll become important later when you meet, or when you find either them in fighting fit shape, or in a state before that fight. When you're introduced to them in a state before that fight. There's actually an upcoming game that I asked the creator not to tell me too much about, because I wanted to avoid spoilers. But I know that there's characters that are dead, but you learn about them through flashbacks and notes that they leave behind. But when you see them, they are totally dead and just like running after you and horrible and deformed and scary and everything.
Okay, I found it. So, yeah, the snippet in Chapter 2 is technically falls after the snippet in Chapter 3. And I think I just lost. Where the hell is Chapter 4? I just lost it. No, come back.
This isn't like one of those Haruhi kinds of things, is it?
Chapter 4! Where did you go? I lost it.
Apparently I had watched the Haruhi series in the wrong order.
Is it right order?
There's two orders in which you can watch the episodes. One is, I believe, the broadcast order.
I don't know why they do that with shows. Like, they did that with the Haruhi show, and then they did it with, like, Monogatari, where every new season had a different title. And I was like, well, now I don't know what fucking order I'm supposed to watch them in, because I don't know which one is first.
Like,
oh, there it is.
I could understand that it was supposed to be, like, an interesting new idea where there's two orders where you can watch the show. There's the chronological order, and then there's the broadcast order. And the broadcast order has, like, the climactic events near the end, but the chronological order has the big final conflict thing happening near the beginning. And then, like, the rest of the episodes are like a long denouement, like, well, the ending of Man in the Iron Mask.
Alright, so I don't know if I did this for the entire book. This wasn't intentional, per se.
Alright.
So, Chapter 2, the snippet in Chapter 2 follows after the snippet in Chapter 3.
Yeah.
The snippet in Chapter 4 follows after the snippet in Chapter 5, right? So it seems that somehow, subconsciously, unintentionally, but also somewhat on purpose, what I did was... See, I'm discovering things that I didn't realize I did, but apparently I did this. And it works out really well, actually, so it's pretty cool. I have two different kinds of... They're all from the same person. They're all from around, like, between this year and this year. But they're about two different subjects. So some of the snippets are, like, just personal snippets. Just... stuff about this character's personal interactions with people, you know, with friends, interactions within their home, interactions with someone they haven't seen in a while. And the other set of snippets directly have to do with the story that precedes the first book and how we got to where we are now. Like, the events that contribute to what got us to this point.
Okay.
And so the chronological snippets of this is what happened before the main story are split up by the random snippets of this is this character's personal life and interactions with these other people. Ultimately, all of which will be affected by what happens in the main story. I didn't realize I did that, but apparently that's a thing that I did. So at some point, where is it? In chapter
potential
4-ish, you come into contact with this object. I don't know if you remember what this object is. A very important object. It is a sentient,
that's something I'll have to reread.
But non-human object.
Oh yes. Okay, I know what you mean. Yeah. The thing that I was going to mention, but since you're not mentioning it, I won't mention.
Without being explicit. Yes,
right. the not quite talking sword. Yeah.
Yes, that's it. So, I'm sure you remember, maybe anyway, the snippets where the sword quote unquote speaks. What do you think about this sword? Just in general, like nothing specific here. Just what do you think about it?
I'm reminded of like old version Dungeons and Dragons intelligent weapons and how they'll choose their masters and how they would how they'll make things difficult if someone tries to use them without their permission.
Okay. So I don't know if you remember what the criteria of this particular weapon is, or the kind of weapon this is. That's okay.
No, I've forgotten.
I'm near the page. Where is it? I can remember.
Of the two gods that we're fighting, but
so in what is this, chapter 4 or is this chapter 3? I don't even freaking know. I can't. I think this is 3. No, this is 4. Okay, never mind. So chapter 4, they go to get this sword because Growl sees it in his shop. He's like, "Hey, buy that." He's like, "Get it." And the old hag, who's just the old hag, she doesn't get a name, she's just the old hag, who's running the shop, tells them that this thing is a destroyer blade, and, you know, gives them the basic lore for how these things are. And that's something that also happens a lot, that you're going to read, and some people will take it literally because that's what you tend to do. But there's a lot of information in this book, in the story, from characters that's not true. Because it's fables, it's legends that have been passed down, and over hundreds and thousands of years, it's gotten mixed up.
Yeah.
So, what the hag says about the sword is true as far as it has been relayed to this point.
Yeah, okay.
But in reality, it's not accurate. Just like in chapter...
The story has mutated over time.
Where is it? Is it the beginning of chapter? When they all go to the tavern after buying, either before or after buying the sword, and there's this old man telling this story about the gods and goddesses, and he's talking about all these wars, the sword later has a conversation with Oren telling him none of these things happened. Like, there's snippets from these stories that are true. But these stories themselves are not. This war did not happen. These 3 wars did not happen. This person never existed. Like,
yeah, okay.
Things have gotten messed up along the way. So, the things that are true that the old hag mentions is, well, it's really just one thing. Like, everything else is kind of just like fluff that somebody's stuck on.
Yeah, okay.
But
so someone was playing
is that they have alternate forms. Some of them are sentient, some of them are not. And they can only be used by the person they were made for.
Ah, yes.
With very rare exception. Like, there are some exceptions to this. There's like 2. It's like 2 exceptions. And how strong they are, usually, because there's also an exception to this rule, how strong they are usually is purely dependent upon how strong the wielder is. So, they get this sword, and this sword, Blitzkrieg or whatever, can talk. It has a little bit of like self-mobility because it like 2 times it floats or whatever. And it vibrates when it laughs or something. Like it has some ability to communicate what it understands to be the proper reaction or emotional reaction to something. Not that it actually feels anything, it's just copying. If Oren attempted, the other true thing is that when people try to use a weapon like this that doesn't belong to them, 9.9 out of 10 times you're going to die. That's just how this works.
Sounds a little bit like in Xenoblade 2, when someone tries to activate a core crystal but they don't have the right qualifications. They just start bleeding from everywhere.
Oh god, yeah. Oh jeez. Or yeah, they just explode into nothing. Oh, whatever. Oh, isn't there another like? Wasn't there another like popular pop culture thing where there was something like that? Shoot. What was it? Final Fantasy 15. The ring of Lucius. Like if you weren't worthy, it would like set you on fire and kill you or something.
Oh wow.
In the game, it was pretty great. You were the false king. So if no, we're sorry.
Oh, I just took a moment to test out my Periscope chat, and it looks like it isn't working. So if you guys are watching from Periscope, I would advise you to look up my channel on YouTube or DLive or Smashcast or Mixer, because those 4 chats are definitely working.
You've been left behind.
Although maybe I should double check just to make sure.
And then just not. No, that's odd.
They said, like, they thought they had it fixed a while ago, and I did a little bit of live testing for them and told them that, like, it'll work. Periscope will work for the first 5 minutes or so, but then suddenly the connection goes wonky.
So,
yeah.
If Oren tried to
But the other 4
Blitzcrank,
work great.
First of all, he wouldn't even be able to unsheath it. Like, he's not
Provided
getting that. Like, same with the hag. She tries to unsheath it in front of them to show them, and she only gets it like halfway out. Like, the way Blitz... Yeah, because Blitzkrieg is a little different than most of the weapons that fall into his category, right? You know, he is sentient, so he can, to some extent, make that choice for you.
Alright.
Whether or not you get
so there's like some resistance out of there.
If you do force him out, he's going to kill you. And that's because...
Alright, yeah.
Blitzkrieg's use is like a complete 180. There's another one. It's also a sword type called Archangel. Minor spoiler here. Way in the future of this story. There's another one called Archangel. It's a fire-based sword type weapon, and most of the weapons in this category serve to amplify their user's ability. Blitzkrieg is literally meant to do the exact opposite. He's meant to set a cap at how much power you can use if you use him, it, I don't know. I'm gonna say it's a he. Blitzkrieg has a very male-dominant personality.
Alright.
So, with Oren and the Old Hag, it's not really an issue because they don't even have enough power to cap out to take him out of the sheath. If his actual owner, uses him, his owner will only be able to use him to a certain extent because he has a cap. And that's literally meant as a self-restraint device.
Okay.
So Blitzkrieg's whole utility purpose is to stop whoever is using him from going overboard.
Yeah.
There are... No, is it just the one? There's one other weapon that has the same utility. Only one.
We've only met Blitzkrieg's...
at this point you've only met Blitzkrieg. There are upwards of, I think there's more than 10. Last time I looked at my logbook, there's about upwards of 10 of these weapons in the story so far that have yet to come about. And they all function in generally the same way, but there's Blitzkrieg and one other where their entire function is to put a power cap on their owner.
Yes. Okay.
Because it just so happens that their owner's a little too strong and needs to chill out. I remember when I was writing him in because I knew I didn't want him to give direct answers. I wanted him to be a little more, not mysterious per se, but just, you know, for him as a sword, it's like, I don't know you guys, I don't have any allegiance to you, I don't owe you answers, I'm gonna give you the barest of minimum.
It feels like a Dungeons and Dragons style intelligent weapon, in how it's sort of assessing the people that it's with.
It's very sassy. I'd say he's very sassy. He's very like screw you kind of thing. And I actually had a little bit of trouble writing his dialogue at some point, because it was like it all rhymes, like it all kind of mirrors each other, and I had trouble finding words, like enough words that I could put together. So I think it's not on your copy, but like the physical copy, he really starts talking on page 70, and they literally just ask him, "Who are you?" and he says his name.
Yeah.
What are you made from? Blood of God, bone of God, soul of God. Which, that is highly open to whatever the hell that means.
Yeah.
How many people or monsters have you killed? An infinite amount. And it's not, he didn't even say infinite, he just put the infinity sign.
Yeah.
Where is your owner? The war came, all fought, some died, some forgot, none prevailed, none lost, price paid, terrible cost. And this is a direct reference to the prologue. Because when the prologue ends, it's technically a tie.
Yeah.
This is a direct reference. There's a lot of what he says in here that is a direct reference to the prologue, but it's also a reference to things that haven't happened yet. And it can be applied to multiple perspectives. Like, there's some stuff he says in here that could be applied to multiple characters across the board evenly. So it is very open at any given point in time as to what he's talking about. But I really enjoyed creating him, I really enjoyed writing him, I really enjoyed making his design on my tablet.
When it comes to rhymes, there's actually run past you if you get the chance to see it. It's called excuse me. It's called The Select Nonsense of Shikumaru Roy. And this guy would write Shikumaru Roy was apparently like a famous, somewhat famous writer. I want to call him like the Weird Al of India, because he would write this like funny poetry, and it was all in Bengali, I believe. And then his son translated it into English. He translated all these poems and one story into English. And it, like, he preserved all the rhymes and the select nonsense and stuff like that. And it worked out so well. It was, for a long time, it was actually one of my favorite books.
Another thing that happens in the book quite frequently is Oren has these dreams.
But yeah, if you could find it, it's
very vivid dreams.
The Select Nonsense of Shikumaru Roy. I think if you just search the Select Nonsense.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah.
Usually ends up dying in these dreams.
Yes. I want to say, yeah, from what I remember, I want to say they're like, I mean, you usually dream, like, the dreams of characters in fiction are usually either prophetic or tests. So, I mean, the go-to guess is that it's something like that. Usually in most, like, side-ish content, I tend to dismiss it until it becomes important, and then I go back and try to review. But I'm kind of resolved to just rereading the whole thing a second time after I get through it the first time, because I've been taking so long to read it the first time that a lot of stuff is kind of that I've kind of blanked on it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I like how, like... Yeah.
I mean, I just discovered that. I didn't even know I did that.
I want to say, like, it's good, like, potential readers who are watching are going to learn a couple of secrets that might help them process all this information. Like the details on the details on the diary entries. I don't think they would have
Let me see here. Maybe you did get to it. You must have, because you're in chapter 12. Maybe you did. It would have been...
The thing that I remember most clearly is that one... I can't say that one dungeon, because there might have been two. But there's just, like, traps and traps and more traps.
Yeah, there is one. There's one... I think there's just one.
Yeah.
One very particular
and I mean,
dungeon.
the traps were really cleverly thought out. Like, I could imagine them vividly. The way that you described them.
I'm happy. Those were really hard to describe. I was like, how does this function? How does this work? Where is it? Shoot. It actually happens right before they get to that dungeon. So there's an interaction that Growl has right before they get to that dungeon. That maze placey. And it's with this pretty much giant automaton creature. I don't know if you remember this interaction.
That one I don't remember quite as much. I'm actually... Like, my mind wants to confuse it with something that you find in a web game called Age of Fable. Because there's a giant automaton that you fight in that. Well, you don't really fight him. He wants you to end his functions. So you end up climbing around through him and going up to his brain. And his brain is like a room full of honey. A room full of capsules full of honey. And you have to break the capsules to stop the fuel from flowing and stop the automaton's functions. So, like, that's the thing.
When I wrote this creature, Have you played the game Journey by that game company? Do you know the game Journey?
I watched someone play it. That's the one where you have like the scarf for your HP.
Yeah, your little cloth.
Yeah.
Man. So there's these machine thingy-majiggies in Journey when you get towards the latter parts of the game. And they're huge. They're terrifying, and they're huge. And I hate them. And they pick you up and they snap your scarf in half, and they're very mean. And
all right.
when you first encounter them, it's literally a jump scare. You're walking through this underground section of the game, and there's all these statues of these machine things.
Oh.
Except there's like 20 of them, and you have to walk in between them. Except one of these statues is a real one.
Oh, I can't stand jump scares.
You're literally standing next to it when it turns on, and it like blasts out of the ground. And then it like 2 seconds later, it circles back around, and if it sees you, it snatches you. And it's absolutely terrible. So, like, it made me so paranoid. I hated that entire first section. But when I wrote this machine into the book, I really did base it off of that, like the way that it looks. The ones in Journey, they don't speak or anything. They don't, like, their only primary role in the game is to be an obstacle and scare the bejesus out of you, and just be large and intimidating. All right. But they're not inherently good or bad. They're very neutral. They have a function. They fulfill it. And that was kind of where I went with this machine, like the way that it looks. And in my head, I was like, if those things in Journey spoke or had some kind of personality, what do I think that would look like in context of where my story is?
All right.
And obviously there have been design changes because I can't straight up visualize somebody else's creature.
Yeah.
But they're all also things that are the same. Like the creatures in Journey, they have this like big boxy head, and there's this eye symbol thingy in the middle of the head that acts like a spotlight, and it turns red when it sees you, and then they snatch you.
Yeah.
Like the boogeyman. So Machine,
I want to say there's
book has a very similar setup. It has a big boxy head with an eye in the center.
I want to say there's a thing in Zelda that does that too. Like an eye that turns red when it sees you, or a spotlight that turns red when it sees you.
I mean, the Guardians have that kind of thing, but theirs is like a laser and a little blue eye.
Yeah. I kind of want to say the Bombo, oh, they're not called Bombos, they're called... Shoot. The eye laser things. But they don't shoot a spotlight out of their eyes.
Beamos?
Beamos, yeah.
Beamos.
There might have been a version of Beamos that shoots a spotlight, but I don't remember.
It's just a laser.
Yeah.
And the laser, like, blows up. Like, explodes.
Yeah.
Also, it kind of reminds me of those statues as well that you mostly see in Ocarina of Time. They look like statues anyway until you try to move them, and then they... Those thingies, yes. Armos.
Oh, the Armos, yes. Yeah. Oh no, wait! It is the Guardians. The not the ground Guardians, but the helicopter ones.
Oh, you're right. They do. I hate those things.
Yeah.
I hate them.
Ancient era of them. I'm actually a little bit.
Oh, I found it. It's on page. Well, for me, it's on page 151. I have no idea where it is for you. What chapter is this? I'm afraid of you. Hold on. Let me skip ahead. See what chapter. Okay, this is gonna be in chapter 9, like middle of chapter 9. When you meet this thing, and I'll just reread some of it to you. Help you remember.
All right.
Where should I start? Shoot, where should I start? Like they're in the middle of a conversation and the conversation just cuts off to have this interaction. No, I don't know.
When does it show up? When are they introduced to it?
They're walking to the dungeon. They're like in the process of walking to the dungeon. It's like before they get there. They're like on the road. Is this? I think this is before they meet. No. No. This is after they meet Setch, because Setch is leading them to the maze. I had a lot of fun writing Row's interactions. He's very dry humor, and I really like that.
Yeah.
Just in general.
I mean, I've always been a fan of the old wise man type of character.
Yeah.
So I'm always happy to see that archetype fulfilled in a fantasy story.
But he has moments of childishness. Like, he's not...
Well, I mean, he's...
cemented in his...
Of course, yeah, you can't write them perfect. You can't write a character as perfect. So yeah, of course they'll have their flaws.
I'll just start from here. Ral huffed, how would you know if I'm old? Maybe where I come from, I'm still considered an infant, completely dependent on the mercies of others. Oren gave this idea a bit of thought, and then looked at Ral with a strange mock humor. Are you? Am I what? Ral said, bracing himself for the inevitable. Are you a squabbling infant? Ral jerked his head up in alarm. To be an infant is one thing. To be a squabbling infant is another matter entirely, and I assure you that squabbling is not one of my activities. Oren gave a light laugh. All right, calm down. You don't have to get so riled up. Ral sighed as he tried to ignore the perplexed stare from Cyrus. He had heard part of the conversation, but had only caught small bits of it. The information Cyrus had compiled from those small bits was very strange. Is there something I should be aware of? Cyrus asked as he followed closely behind Setch. Ral gave a toothy grin. If I told you, I would have to point your facial features with a wall repeatedly in order to make you forget. Cyrus's eyes widened considerably. Setch turned his head slightly, his eyes also lied. Oren looked at Ral with mild concern. In other words, Ral shook his body like a wet dog. It's classified. Oren narrowed his eyes. You seriously need to chill. Ral smirked as much as a bear could smirk. Silence. I'm trying to savor the moment. Cyrus whipped around in shock. What moment? You just threatened to bash my head in. Ral looked up at Cyrus with a mixture of boredom and amusement. Precisely. I'm savoring your reaction to my reacting to your reaction on a conversation that honestly had nothing to do with you. Cyrus pursed his lips. How very kind of you. There was a hint of anger in his voice. Ral lowered his head. You're quite welcome, little Grasshopper. And that I stuck in, and I can't remember who, but there was someone I knew. who used to call me Grasshopper.
Ah.
And I'm sad I can't remember who the heck it was. Because I definitely put that in there for them. But, whatever. Cyrus
Someone that you're...
mouth to retort, but his words were drowned out by a deafening, mechanical roar. Growl looked up into the sky, fear stretching his face, his sharp teeth glinting in the sunlight. Setch and Cyrus covered their ears, and Oren watched Growl in confusion. "Everyone get back," Growl shouted. His brown eyes were wide and anxious. No one questioned Growl or argued with him. Cyrus grabbed Setch and they backed into the shadow of the trees. Oren crouched behind some bushes. "No matter what, you all must stay there till I say otherwise," Growl ordered. The roar died down after a while, but an eerie humming replaced it. Oren could not see all of it, but a shadow descended upon Growl. It seemed to completely block out the sun. Growl bowed his head, keeping his eyes level to the ground. It took Oren every ounce of self-control he had to remain silent. Floating above Growl, Oren could see an immense, golden, head-like object. The head appeared to be connected to an even larger body, but Oren couldn't discern it from where he was. In the center of the head was a large, white, glowing eye. The head itself was angular, with sharp protrusions on either side. Oren heard steam hissing and the sound of cogs and gears turning. There was a distinct clank of an axle dropping. The humming noise grew louder. It was an odd and intriguing sound. Growl lifted his head warily, but his eyes remained fixed on the ground. "I thought your kind was under orders to stay within." Growl gave a cautious glance to where Oren was hiding. "You were supposed to stay on the other side, or so I presumed." The mechanical head drifted closer to Growl. A deep, grinding noise came within it. Oren thought it almost sounded like a laugh. A pair of pointy, golden appendages drifted into view. One of them had a small spark crackling on its tip. It jabbed Growl in the side. Oren heard Growl growl deeply as a visible current of electricity raced over him. The other appendage had a small coating of refined steel on its tip. This appendage moved quickly across Growl's cheek, cutting him. Growl hissed and backed away in anger. The same grinding noise, presumably a laugh, echoed through the air. The appendage that had cut Growl had small drops of blood on it. It retracted from view, and for a second the machine's eye glowed red. "Why are you here?" Growl said quietly. The head twisted on an unseen screw till it was upside down. And literally, that was like something I had to figure out of, this is a machine, how do I get it to display some semblance of emotion? And I was like, oh, okay, well, they're vindictive. Like, they're very vindictive machines, all in all. When it's feeling humorous or it's mocking someone, I'm just gonna make its head flip upside down. And I literally just thought back to like Zelda and other things like that, where you have these mods, like, do you remember Dead Hand from Ocarina of Time?
Dead Hand from Ocarina of Time. I remember Bongo Bongo.
I hate it all. So Dead Hand.
Oh wait, no, I do remember Dead Hand.
Yeah.
Yes.
You remember the Shadow Temple? It's
yeah.
like a bunch of hands come out of the ground, and if one of them grabs you, then the body comes out.
Yeah.
With the long neck and the chomping teeth. It was terrifying. So I really thought of that. I thought of like this head that could move in very not normal ways. And I was like, let's just flip the whole thing upside down. That sounds like a fun thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Body horror, yeah. Actually, when you said, like, when it flips its head upside down, I was thinking of the 80s, Safe Play PSA, where they have, I think his name was A-Star or something? A-Star the robot, and his quote was, hi, I'm A-Star, I'm a robot, I can put my arm back on, you can't. And he demonstrates his arm, like, detaching and putting back on. I think that's like a robot mocking humans, like, I can take myself apart. Yeah. I'd say that, like, we are superior to humans because we can lose an arm and not even think about it. I can take my head right off and put it upside down and not even think about it. You, however, you'll die if you even try that.
The head
Don't mess with me.
On the unseen screw till it was upside down. Again, the strange laugh echoed. Answer me, Growl demanded, his voice rising. The head spun back around at a fiercely quick pace, and when I say spun back around, like in my head when I imagine this, it didn't like just turn 180 degrees and then turn back 180. It like flipped upside down, and then as like a show of anger, spins back around like 6 times before it stops right side up again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's boss time. Let's use our shiny new analyzer skill.
The head spun back around at a fiercely quick pace, and the machine rammed itself into Growl, knocking him over. Oren's body tensed, as if it was him who had just been hit. This was also a fun thing, right? This was the first time I think... No! This would have been the second or third time that I utilized this in the book. But now you'll actually get to hear what the actual vowels sound like. Yay. Prevuro mesto rashar, vice vitra. The machine's voice was deep and cold. It rang out as clear as a bell, loud and powerful. Oren felt a chill run up his spine. He didn't recognize those words. He'd never come across them in any textbook. Oren turned to Cyrus, who shrugged upon meeting Oren's gaze. Cyrus quickly pulled out his large book and began carefully flipping through the index. Oren turned to Growl. How would the bear respond to such a creature who spoke a language that had never been heard? Growl lowered his head. Koltaria, semsaskira. Another grinding laugh rang out. It seemed that this creature took pleasure in pushing the poor bear around. Kayo contores mers bear somstrata mira. The white eye of the machine brightened as it spoke. Growl nodded meekly. Sok uap coin. The machine's hum softened. A massive gust of wind knocked Oren off his feet. It was accompanied by the winding sound that filled the air, followed by the shrieking of gears. The massive mechanical creature soared to the sky. A few minutes passed before no one could hear the humming any longer. So, the beautiful part, the beautiful thing that I can do for you exclusively on this live stream is the thing I just read that probably sounded like complete gibberish to you.
You wanted to emphasize the vowel sounds, right?
Yeah. So
yeah.
This is the language that I created specifically for this series. Just like Gerald taking credit Elvish for Boredom, which mind you is a much more incredible feat because Elvish is hard to strike. What's the word I'm looking for here? The grammatical setup of the sentences of this language are pretty much fairly identical to English. Like pretty much the same. It's literally just wording. And there are some like vowel rules. So the word vice is V-I-I-S. It works off of vowel coupling. If it's one I, it's E. If it's two I's, it's I.
Alright.
It kind of works like that. So, preve uor mesto, Growlshire, vice z vitra. Vice has two eyes, Z has one eye, Vitra has one eye. And there aren't really silent letters, like the word Kayo is literally K-H-Y-O.
Yeah, I want to say that, like, fantasy writers who do the original language kind of thing tend not to throw in vestigial stuff that they would have in their native languages, like silent letters in English.
Yeah. Well, because it's stupid. English is a stupid language. English is a stupid language. Why would you do that? Why is the word Q literally the letter Q followed by 4 silent letters? Who did that? Why? Any foreign speaker who sees this word and is trying to learn this word is gonna have their mind wrecked. Literally ignore everything you see, just look at the first letter in the word.
I don't suppose you've tried to learn Esperanto.
I have not. What is that?
Esperanto it's a made-up language that is hybridized from, I think, English, Spanish, Latin, and...
Oh my god, that sounds terrible.
Yeah, but they wanted to do it to take all the useful bits of those languages and meld them into one, like, universal worldwide language. They wanted to make a language that was easy to learn, didn't have stuff like silent letters or special letter rules, and could be used as a universal language all around the world. I don't think it was successful, but there might still be an Esperanto society hiding out somewhere.
Nice. So the beautiful thing about this conversation that I'm going to give you exclusively in this live stream, I'm going to translate this for you, okay?
Alright.
This conversation has to do with something that happens 2 chapters later in like chapter 11, which you've already read. If you're in chapter 12, you've read this.
Yeah.
You remember, do you remember Tharzar?
Do I remember what?
The big demon they fight at the end of this dungeon, Tharzar.
No.
No? Oh my god. Are you sure you're in chapter 12?
I think part of the reason that I took a break was because I was kind of glazing over what I was reading currently.
Here, well, I think for this stream I'm just going to read the end of the book to you.
Really?
We'll do this together, sure.
Alright, okay.
Okay. So this conversation that Growl has with this creature, the first sentence is Preve uro mesto, Ralshire, Vices Zizitra, which means watch your mouth, Ralshire, son of lightning. That's literally what the sentence is. Okay? The head does the fanatic 180 spinning.
Yeah.
Slams into him and then tells him to shut up. That's what happens.
Yeah.
Next sentence, Growl says, Kotaria semsaskira. He says, forgive me, I am foolish. Sentence after that, the machine says, Kayo konkores mersber sons brata mira. Which, and I hope I'm remembering this right. I'm probably not. I'm going to shoot myself. I made this language. I still have trouble remembering what these words mean. They're talking about, I can't remember the exact translation for the sentence, they're talking about Setch. And the machine is pretty much telling him, watch Setch, and, what is this word? I think the machine is saying something like, wait for when the boy reveals his true face. He's pretty much saying, keep an eye on Setch.
Okay.
And then Braille says, Sokua Proim, which is, as you wish, I believe. And that's their entire conversation. And then the rest of, what is this, chapter 11, is them getting to the maze. Chapter 10 is them going through the maze, which you've read because you said you remembered it and you liked the details and the puzzles and the stubba, but you don't remember Tharzar, so we're gonna quickly recap like the last page of chapter 10.
All right.
Quick recap. So they get through the final puzzle. The final puzzle is this thing called a karma. It's pretty much a black hole, but a lot smaller, and it functions by sucking energy from the things around it. So in order to beat it, they remove anything that's giving off a kind of energy so that it has to eat itself. Pretty much. Ah, yeah. Like, it pretty much Ouroboros snakes itself.
Yeah.
And then it, gets angry and explodes.
Yeah.
Whatever. All fun things, So they get past this puzzle. They get to the final room in the maze. They stop. They have some snacks. They eat some snacks because snacks are always important. There's always time for snacks, no matter what. Like, I don't care if I just wrote a really bloody battle scene and 50,000 people died. We're stopping for snacks. Okay? That's how this works. So they get to the final area. This is where I'm going to pick up. Finally, after getting lost once or twice, the group emerged into an open space. The area was large, filled with trees. Holy crap. I just found a spelling error. No! So I spelled trees, but it says tress. T-R-E-S-S. I hate this. I hate everything. I hate.
It's alright. You'll fix it when you release the trilogy.
I hate coming back 2 years later and finding spelling. You know what? I technically self-published this, so I can still go to an actual publishing company and give them, because I retain the rights. Be like, hey, if I give you the rights, you need to fix all these errors that I just found. This cannot be allowed to stand. The trees didn't look wooden, rather they were metal and steel. They had screws and rivets holding their branches on, and the leaves looked sharp enough to cut someone. The sky above the trees was gray and smoky. In front of all the trees was a massive steel chair, and on the chair rested a huge iron mace. Here we are, Such said. In case you don't remember, recap, Such is this little boy that they find outside of this dungeon, and he's like, come with me, come help me, my brothers and sisters are trapped by this demon, he's gonna eat them, I need you to help me. Like, that's the whole reason. They were heading in this direction to begin with.
Yeah.
More likely than not, if Such had not come and gotten them, they would have gone around the maze instead of through it, because that's an option.
Yeah, because, I mean, they wouldn't need to deal with that otherwise, right?
Such is literally the reason. Yeah, because they were on a trail. They were, like, on a road going in a direction, and then Such was like, hey, no, let's take this back way. So that's literally the whole reason they go through this place is because of Such. Here we are, Such said. They must really exist. Father Times. Cyrus's eyes were bulging out of their sockets. Hands of discord. Another quick recap. They talk about this earlier in Chapter 10 and in Chapter 9, I believe. The Hands of Discord are this, it's a clock, pretty much, owned by Father Time. And if you possess it, it pretty much sustains your life by ticking backwards. If you were to destroy it, if you were to break it, it would automatically speed up, and for you would automatically, in that moment, age every year that it ticked backwards. So all the time that's added up, if that clock breaks, gets added onto you. And, you know, if you were 80 and you added 20 years on, now you're 100. If you were 80 and you added 50 years on, now you're 150. You like, if you're a regular person, you instantly die.
Yeah.
If that clock breaks. I'm
just thinking, like, that scene in Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
You know which one I'm talking about.
That's how this clock functions. And there's actually is it at the beginning of this chapter? It's at the beginning of the next. That's really nice. I did that. Okay. So we'll get there. No spoilers. We'll get there.
Alright.
They must really exist. Father Times, Cyrus's eyes were bulging out of their sockets. Hands of discord, Oren finished. Yeah, but I don't see them. Where is the Thar guy? Oren asked suspiciously. By this time, I can't remember exactly how this... Oh, Sitch brings it up. Sitch has already told them about this demon Thars are. Like, they already know that this demon apparently exists. That's who they're going to.
Alright.
Sitch walked forward and traced a finger along the large spiked mace. What do you mean? Growl took a few steps back, pulling Oren and Cyrus with him. Sitch laughed hideously. He's right here. Sitch turned around to face them, a wicked grin on his face. His body shifted awkwardly, convulsing and expanding. His laugh became deep and garbled. It's nice to finally meet you, said the deformed Sitch. His skin split open to reveal a brown head with two sets of horns. His teeth were all sharp points. His oversized hands had long, sharp claws on them, as did the feet. A tail slithered into view. Sitch, Oren choked. Cyrus pulled him back a few paces. Ralph snarled and growled, a deep hatred concealed in the back of his throat. No, my dear friend, the creature said. It stood upright, towering over everyone. Fluids ran down the creature, remnants of its meat disguise of a child. I'm sorry, that was gross. What was I thinking of when I wrote that? I was honestly thinking of Men in Black, where the cockroach, like, alien creature uses that guy's body as, like, a suit, but when it goes back into being a cockroach, it, like, splits out. Like, that's honestly what I was thinking about.
Strange thing is, if I recall, that guy ended up okay in the end. Like, they rebuilt him or something, didn't they?
No, because he was dead. Like, they killed him. And then
I wanted to say, like, he must have died during the show, but for some reason I remember him being, like, okay afterwards.
No.
Like, what did they do? Did they do some, like, MIB magic or something? Some special alien technology? Or...
I don't know. Okay. Yeah, so that's what I was thinking. I was like, meat suit splitting in half. That's great.
Yeah. I was just thinking the wording is very modern for, like, a very, like, a not very technological setting, but, like, the wording of meat disguise sounds very modern.
Meat disguise of a child, yeah.
Yeah.
Oren's knees shook in anger. I am Tharazar. Chapter 11, Judgment of Time. Snippet time, woo! So, this snippet, I just read to you about the Hands of Discord.
Yes.
And how if they break, they essentially kill their owner or whatever the heck else, okay?
They rapidly undo their boon.
Undo, yes. This snippet is super important because this snippet at the beginning of chapter 11 is all about Father Time. And because technically the Hands of Discord belong to him, so why does he not have them? This is a question that has arisen. This snippet is all about Father Time. A man visited me and my student today. I knew him, though his appearance has changed greatly over the past few centuries. His robes of golden silk were ripped and frayed. His human visage, flesh and muscle were completely gone. He was literally a walking skeleton, one eye still in its white socket. He swayed to and fro, a bony hand stretched outward. His soul was shattered, and discord was slowly counting down. Discord being, obviously, the Hands of Discord.
Yes.
He was about to die, fully and infinitely. I suppose he saw something in time that shook him to the core, so greatly that he broke. He left one warning, slurred and empty. Purge the evil within this sanctuary. His skeleton fell to the ground, and his bones broke into pieces. I took his robes and had them mended, but discord leapt, latched onto a remnant of its master. This evil has already dug its way in. Only death will rid us of it. So that snippet is literally everything you need to know about how we are currently at this point.
Yeah.
It was you all this time, Oren said. His legs felt like jelly, and his heart was as loud as a drum, and twice as fast. Why hadn't he seen it before? Such knew so much about the maze, the obstacles. Perhaps he had known too much. Such knew so much about Tharazar as well. Plain as it had been... Oh, my phone is 7%. Whoops. Plain as it had been, no one had realized. If they did, they didn't show it. I thought so, Raoul said, his voice low and cold. Oren looked at him, confusion set on his face like a mask. You knew. Then why didn't you say anything? Raoul stared at Oren, his large brown eyes silently answering his question. You're cruel, Oren snapped. Maybe so, but it was for your benefit, Raoul said. Benefit? How could Raoul say that? Why did he allow Oren... Oh my god, I left out the word too. Why did he allow Oren to believe such was good and small and frail? You care too much. You must learn to control your emotions, to trust no one. At times, you cannot even trust yourself, Raoul said. His voice was the equivalent of a hot branding iron being shoved down Oren's windpipe. Oren ground his teeth together. Raoul was such a jerk. How dare he speak to him like that? Raoul was nothing but a lowly animal. Yet that lowly animal was correct. I have grown quite bored of your squabbling, the demon snarled. Sorry, the demon growled. Raoul snarled, his teeth flashing in the fading rays of sun. The demon smiled, a deep gurgling laugh erupting from his throat. Cyrus slid up to Raoul's ear, whispering so Oren wouldn't hear. We can't outrun this one. How do we win? Oren won't stand a chance, considering. Destroy the hands, Raoul replied. Easier said than done, Cyrus grumbled. Indeed, and you will perish before you can get half that far, Tharazar roared. Why did I make names so difficult to say? Like, I always make a name that has stupid vowels and consonant sounds, and then follow up with a word that has identical vowels and consonant sounds, so then I can't say that word when I need to.
I mean, you want to make, especially when you're writing for a fantasy setting, you want to make unique, cool-sounding names.
I do.
Yeah.
It's one thing to read it in my head, it's another to try and force my mouth to form the sound thing.
I'm just wondering if it's maybe good practice, good writing practice to read out your chapters before publishing.
Yeah. Growl glared at him, rage visible within his dark pupils. A vile, toothy grin stretched across his face. We'll see about that. The demon smiled, black, sharp teeth filling the gap between his crusty purple lips. Like that sentence alone was so hard! Crusty purple lips, black teeth filling the gap. You should get your boy, Tharazar said. Cyrus clenched, his eyes widening. Oren, get up, Growl yelled. Oren didn't move. He was paralyzed, frozen on his knees. The demon's massive hand rose and swiftly descended. Oren! Cyrus screamed. The sound of flesh being torn filled the musky air. A screech of pain vibrated off the surroundings. Tharazar reared back, resentment and agony throbbing through his silver blood. Curse you, boy, I'll kill you, Tharazar bellowed. He held his clawed hand, a large slice running from one end to the other. Oren, frozen as he was, had unsheathed his sword, defending himself. His terror and fury fueled his strength. Oren stood, mouth clamped shut, his hand fiercely gripping the handle of his weapon. Of his weapon. I curse you too. I curse you with death, and shall send you to hell. Oren's eyes lit up with rage. The purple had brightened to an almost crimson color. Let's all remember that Oren is, like, 16.
Yeah.
So. Like, let's remember what I'm putting these poor children through.
I don't think it's that unusual to have, like, teenage adventurers. I mean, that was something that happened quite a lot, especially in the, like, I'm playing a game that stars teenage adventurers now. But yeah, a lot of JRPGs, a lot of video games of the SNES and N64, and like around that time, had teenagers going on their first adventures.
Yeah.
And like I remember, I was just getting out of just going into and getting out of university at the time, and I'm like, I'd really like to play adventures that are my age. I'd like to play adventures that are like going into adulthood.
True.
But I mean, now that I know what I know, adulthood was around Japanese culture. Adulthood is around 13, 14. Like I believe, talking to an old Japanese coworker of mine, that 13 was celebrated as the last year that you're allowed to act like a kid. Dang. Starting at 14, you should start acting like an adult, even if you're not recognized as one.
Get a job, move out.
Yeah. Well, I don't know as far as get a job and move out. You're still allowed to live with your parents. You're just not allowed to. You're not allowed to play video games. You're not allowed to collect collectibles, watch anime, that kind of thing. You should start like thinking about your career and finding a girlfriend and thinking about marriage and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I guess. Getting interested in adult interests, and that's where you get the idea of chunibyo, or as some have called it, like high school syndrome, or high school syndrome, I believe. Second year syndrome, where you've got kids of 14 and older acting like 13, or being super embarrassed about what they did when they were 13 or 14.
Even though it's totally normal.
Yeah.
It was totally normal.
Yeah. Whereas, like, from our perspective, you're pretty much a child until you're 25. Like, new psychology studies have shown that, we're living longer, we're gonna stay kids for longer.
Yeah.
Like, your mind is still developing until your mid-20s, and then there's some people who still believe that, like, once you turn 26, you're over the hill. Whereas, it's really more, you're just becoming an adult.
Yeah.
You're really only just an adult at that point.
People mature different rates too, so.
But yes, the things you're putting those children through.
I know, terrible. I just killed his parents and killed this person. Murdered him. For me. Oren advanced, charging at Tharzar, his footsteps sounding like thunder against steel plates in the ground. You've got a big mouth, boy, Tharzar hissed. Fire spread through Oren's body as he fell to the floor. Did I skip a page? I don't think I did. Nope, I didn't. Okay, just making sure. Fire spread through Oren's body as he fell to the floor. Blood steadily dripped from his head and leg. The outer maze wasn't the only place with hidden mechanisms, such as the sharp silver spikes that shot up from the ground. Adrenaline shot through Oren's nervous system like lava spewing from a volcano. He started to push off from the floor. Stay still, Growl shouted. He hadn't noticed it before, but there, just grazing Oren's cheek, was the cold touch of a metal spike. One fast movement, one flinch, and Oren would be skewered, but still he smiled. Tharzar growled, taking 2 steps towards him. What are you smirking at, boy? You have your tricks, I have mine. Oren lifted his arm slowly, and using as much wrist strength as possible, threw his sword towards Tharzar's feet. Tharzar roared. He wheeled around, trying to step away from Oren's blade as it skidded across the ground. Steel spikes followed the sliding sword and buried their tips and bodies into Tharzar's feet. The demon fell backward in pain. I'm proud of myself for figuring that out, by the way. You will burn for this, he shouted, hissing, blood and foam flowing over the cracked, blackened soles of his feet. Growl rushed forward, pulling Oren off the ground, the deadly, shining silver spikes missing his body by centimeters. Cyrus, hold him here, Growl said. Growl, don't, Cyrus yelled. Being the leader, Growl ignored him. Find the hands and get rid of them, he growled. Cyrus nodded and dragged Oren towards the Father... Why the hell did I stick the word there? Towards Father Time's tree. Growl drove his claws into the floor. His eyes closed. His lips forming inaudible words. The air started out. Earlier I said something about lightning there, but you don't remember this, so that probably didn't make any sense, but this is why I said lightning there. The air started to whistle, the wind whipped wildly, and the ground... Say that 5 times fast. Wind whipped wildly.
The wind whistled wildly.
Wind whipped wildly.
Whipped wildly.
Whipped wildly.
The wind whipped wildly.
Why did I do that? Why did I stick 3 W words back to back? What's wrong with me?
Alliteration. It's a standard writing thing.
And the ground was racked with tremors. Cyrus struggled to stay upright with Oren leaning on him, and he thought for certain the ground would give out underneath him. Growl summoned every ounce of strength in his body. A crest flashed on his forehead. It was an upside-down lightning bolt, with 2 triangles on either side pointing out diagonally. There was a triangle underneath his eyes as well. The crest glowed a fierce shade of gold. Gold symbols lit up on his arms and legs as well. The final word that left Growl's lips was more powerful than anything Cyrus or Oren had ever encountered. Vashire. Cyrus and Oren couldn't see what happened next. It blinded them, and left purple spots in their vision. Surges of electricity rained from the heavens, incinerating anything they hit. The metallic leaves on the trees of time vaporized in a shower of sparks. Thunder deafened everyone's ears, lightning blinding them, each bolt engulfing some part of Tharazar's massive body in a magical flame. But unlike the lifeless fake trees, Tharazar was able to prevent himself from being immediately turned to ash. Growl stood his ground, roaring the word strike over and over again, slowly chipping at the magical barrier Tharazar was using to protect himself. Cyrus dragged Oren up the firelit slope towards Father Time's tree. The steel was hot. Flashes continued to light the sky, the spidery zigzags of airborne fire stretching over the clouds like fingers. Cyrus laid Oren on his back. It was still extremely difficult to see. How do we find the clock? Oren screamed over the thunder. Cyrus shut his mouth and opened his ears. There, almost inaudible over Tharazar's wail of pain, was a soft, rhythmic ticking. You can hear it. Follow the sound, Cyrus shouted. It was easier said than done. The ticking seemed to be resonating from everywhere. Pinpointing the source was seemingly impossible. Oren slid his face against the tree, listening intently for sound louder than all others, besides Tharazar. Currently, he was the loudest thing around them. Cyrus mimicked Oren, searching for the source. Oh my god, speak, Anna. Both of them met at the backside of the tree. We're never going to find it, Oren said, twisting his neck to smooth the stiff muscles. We have to, Cyrus said. Growl is... A hand brushed up to seal his lips. There it was, a sound louder than all others. Oren lifted his eyes, staring at the top of the tree. It's up there, he said, panic starting to seep in. Cyrus gazed up as well. At the top of the tree, barely visible, was a large set of hands screwed onto a thin, golden circle, but the circle had no numbers on it. The whole thing was encompassed inside a golden casing with a keyhole in the front. The hands flitted from point to point, but turned counterclockwise. It was visibly prolonging Tharazar's life. A small blue swirl, something like a mist and a liquid mixed together, were at the joint of the 2 hands. I thought the hands were supposed to be inside of the tree, not hovering above it, Cyrus said. Stop complaining, Oren snapped. Now the only problem was scaling hundreds of feet up a giant metal, and not to mention noisy bush. It seemed relatively easy. The metal tree had notches and ledges all over its surface. They would provide a climbable surface. Not for long, unfortunately. A streak of lightning cascaded down, shredding through the tree's center. The tree creaked and groaned, shifting uneasily. And then it began to plummet downwards in 2 large halves. Move, Cyrus yelled, yanking Oren in between the falling pieces. Dirt flew up in the air as the 2 halves crushed the earth. Nice going, Growl, Oren screeched. Growl hissed, ignoring Oren, focused solely on turning Tharzar into ash. Cyrus stood distressed and deep in thought. They had no 50-foot ladders, no massive slingshot, no arrows, and no wings. There were so many problems, but there were practically no solutions. Growl was beginning to look weak and frail. Cyrus knew he wouldn't be able to keep up the assault for much longer. Since the clock still existed, Tharzar would still be alive, despite the massive beating he was currently taking. Cyrus ran the dilemma through his head, pausing here and there to see where a solution might be lurking, unseen and waiting. Cyrus! Oren slammed into him full force, knocking him off his feet and onto the ground. Light blinded them for a few seconds, and when the colors adjusted themselves, Cyrus saw the large scorch mark where he had previously been standing. We need to get to that clock, Oren said, out of breath. What we need is a miracle, Cyrus yelled in frustration. I can do miracles. Cyrus and Oren jumped at the unfamiliar feminine voice again. Feminine voice. Again, there she was, the strange cloaked woman who had offered advice and given away artifacts. Quick recap. This is the woman that Oren meets in Chapter 5 when he goes for a nighttime stroll after talking to Blitzkrieg about stories and stuff. And she throws a huge key at him. She's like, here, take this random thing that I have on me. It's huge and heavy, but be like Link and Twilight Princess and stuff all that shit in your pocket.
So wait, that's not the only other time that we saw her, is it?
So far.
So she's been gone for 6 chapters.
Yeah, she's gone from like chapter 5 until like chapter 11
now
or so.
Yeah.
Yep. And I think she introduces herself. No, she introduced herself on this page. Okay, never mind. Keep reading. Before I get ahead of myself. Are you following me? Oren said, instantly recognizing her black apparel. No, I'm here because you need me. She tilted her head at an odd angle. Cyrus leaned towards Oren. You know her? Not at all, but she seems to know me. Don't lie. We've met before, in the woods by the Shrine of Usher. See? Recap. There we go. She said.
Yes.
Oh, Oren grunted. He crossed his arms in front of his chest. She's also the one who mended Oren's sword and gave it back to him after a slave broke it, which was never explained how she did that, but she was like, hey, here's this giant key. Also, here's your sword that was broken. It's mine now. Because that's just how she works. The woman flinched. Oh, that's all you have to say? After I went to all the trouble of giving you that key. How rude. What's your name? Cyrus asked. She looked at Cyrus, and he saw her lips curve into a smile. You can call me Gudra. Gudra is G-U-D-R-A.
Yes.
Which is also a word in the language made up for this book. It means ghost. So she's calling herself Ghost.
Alright.
Just side note, hint, foreshadow.
Just in case anyone heard Gudra and thought the Pokemon.
Yes. Cyrus raised an eyebrow at the strange name. What is the key for? Oren snapped. Gudra chuckled. If you and the thing I'm not doing that this language does is it has huge emphasis on some consonants. Like Gudra is Gudra. Gudra.
Okay.
It's like almost like a rolling R. But it's annoying to always say it like that.
Yeah, I would want to. Yeah,
like,
I was thinking like if you're gonna make up a language, you're probably gonna make up like an accent to go with it.
Yeah, it has a little bit of an accent, so Gudra. Or actually, if I go back.
Because a fantasy language won't sound very fantasy language-like if it sounds like you're saying it with English consonants and vowel tones.
See, now I'm not able to find it.
Oh, kitten's trying to speak to me. Meow meow. Maybe Kitten has a fantasy language of his own.
Oh my god. I mean...
Supposedly cats will speak differently to people they'll meow differently. They'll meow with different accents in different parts of the world.
That's interesting. That's cool. I like that. Yeah, so in the earlier chapter when Growl is talking to that big machine thing and I was reading, like,
yes,
the pronunciation is pretty thick. It's Pretur mesto Raushar Vice Zizitra Kotaria Semsaskira Kayo Contores Meros Ver Sons Brachta Mira. Like, the R's have just a teeny little bit
yes
of a roll on them. And
is this something that you'll be...
Yeah.
Is this a book that you'll be releasing in audio form?
If I can get enough funding.
Because I imagine you'll probably want to tell your actors that.
Roll the R's.
And have them practice.
It's not heavy. It's not like in Spanish. It's not like
yes
sound. I guess it's more akin to Japanese. Like, they don't really have
it's very
R's or
light.
L's. It's like a rat sound. That. It's kind of like that, but it is.
They have that. Yeah. Okay.
For softly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or maybe like the Indian,
so
like
says,
RD
kind
of sound.
Gudra. It's a very soft roll on ours.
Yeah.
And the vowels are not stretched, very strong. They're strong vowels. Like,
yeah, like that's where the emphasis on the word comes from.
Every word is said with purpose. Like
yeah.
In English, you can like mumble English or speed through it. In this,
yeah,
English,
you can slur it once you get.
Every single word is like overpronounced.
Okay. Like each word is part of a magic spell, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Where you have to speak it with.
Yeah.
With
It's not a. Kayo Contores Mes Burns. It's Kayo Contores Mes Burns.
Yeah.
Like, force it out.
Yeah. Each word is spoken through an extruder.
Yes. Yes. What is the key for? Oren snapped. Gudra chuckled. If you think that Tharazar, and even names like Tharazar, like Tharazar is just a regular name, but you could extend that to some of the fantasy names in here as well. Tharazar.
Yeah. I mean, you can say someone's name with an English accent or with the accent of their native language.
Yeah. If you think that Tharazar and the tree your friend destroyed were the only things guarding the clock, you're dead wrong. What do you mean? Cyrus said, leaning towards her. The Hands of Discord are kept in a special element-resistant casing. No power can destroy it except for the power that made it. And I totally jabbed at myself in this next line. There seems to be an awful lot of this indestructible business going around, Cyrus muttered. Just about every strange thing they had come across was either invincible, with a few exceptions, or extremely difficult to get rid of.
Mm-hmm.
That is a habit I have. You still haven't mentioned why you gave me the key, Oren said. He was growing impatient. Well, I may have snuck in here while Tharazar was asleep, Rivets began. Okay, Cyrus said in boredom. And I may have noticed the casing on the clock, she continued. Okay, Oren said. He rubbed his temple in annoyance. And I may, just a little bit, with full knowledge of the danger, but only wanting to assist you and knowing you'd never succeed if I didn't. And this is how her personality, she is just very, whatever. Continued rambling. Get on with it, the two boys yelled. I may have snatched the key away for you. Stop shouting like a bunch of Aegis. Which you'd have to remember chapter 4 to understand the reference to the Aegis, which we can recap at a later date. The three of them glared at each other until Oren broke the silence. What's an Aegis? You don't need to know, Gudra snapped. So, Cyrus began. The reason you gave Oren this ridiculously big blue key was for the casing on the clock. Yep. I can raise you to the clock's height, but the rest is up to you, she said. Then what are we waiting for? Cyrus said, his voice barely audible above the roaring of thunder. Fine with me, she said. Her voice exuded a slick velvet tone, which I cannot mimic right now. Oren guessed that she had quite the smile on her face. Gudra pressed her hand to the floor. It shook ever so slightly. Then it pulsed, throbbed, and turned a light shade of green. The green turned to a glow that brightened and intensified. It expanded and covered the roots of the trees, shifting from a light to a dark green as the glow dimmed and brightened. Small luminescent orbs came up from the ground and floated through the air. Sound seemed to dissolve into pure silence. The thunder could not be heard, the lightning could not be seen. All was still within this moment. The floating lights formed a small circle in the air, and then, within the blink of an eye, flew up into the clouds. Around Gudra's fingers, that had buried their tips in the soil, small vines stretched and wrapped around her hand, coiling and swirling delicately. With force and grace, she tightened her grip on the vines and wrenched them out of the ground. The vines swiftly became larger and wrapped themselves around Cyrus and Oren's waists, twisting skyward. They formed a circular platform and rested the boys upon it, steadying them until they regained balance. The platform of plants continued to rise. Down below, Gudra's voice pierced the thunder's roars, sound returning to the world. Try not to fall off, and watch out for lightning. If it hits the vines, it's a long drop and sudden stop for you both. What? You never told us that, Cyrus shouted. It's a flaw, whatever. She ignored them both, turned on her heel, and sped away. A wave of childish, though sadistic humor washed over her. A deep, cynical laugh bubbled inside of her. Oren watched her until her figure disappeared. He then turned to face his final obstacle. There they were, inches away from it, but still so far from ridding themselves of it. The clock ticked noisily, slowly counting backwards. Oren held up the key, examining it, wondering if what the woman had said was true. Oren, Cyrus said, let's finish this. Oren nodded, and searched for the keyhole he had seen from the ground. Finding it, Oren held the key up, bracing himself for possible shock. The clock could have more than a casing on it. Cyrus gripped his arm. Do it. Oren shifted all his weight forward, thrusting the key into the hole. Cyrus then gripped the handle and attempted to turn it. It wouldn't budge. A shattering roar filled the air. I'll rip you apart. Tharzar was charging towards their platform of vines. Weak, pathetic humans. Hit the floor, Growl yelled. Oren and Cyrus laid flat against the plants, peeking over the edge to watch Tharzar and Growl. Something was building. Oren could taste power in the air. Look at me, you pus-bathing pig, Growl shouted. Tharzar stopped in his tracks and glared at Growl with fury. How dare you, he growled. Tharzar lifted a hand towards the vines. I wouldn't do that if I were you, Growl said calmly. Tharzar laughed. Oh? He crouched down and charged at the bear. Growl stood his ground with zeal. Tharzar was quickly advancing on him. Tharzar has ADHD out of the way, because he was like 2 inches away from just killing Oren and Cyrus by grabbing the plants, and then just decided not to. Someone insulted him.
I want to say, like, you've played MMOs before, right?
Yeah.
The fighter has that taunt ability. He's got to take the aggro away from the squishies.
Yeah. Growl is aggroing the heck out of it.
I feel like you designed it with that intention. Designed the battle scenes with that intentionally. When Raul does that,
they are supposed to be very cinematic, action-oriented scenes. Like I want them to be as vivid as possible in your head. And Raul is a very look at me, in a fight kind of character.
I want to say, if you're looking to get these scenes animated, there's this one gal, Phoenix Astra, who might be interested in doing that for you. Phoenix Astra, she is on my timeline.
I said ooh. It was an ooh of ooh, like.
Oh, yeah. I thought you were asking who.
No.
But yeah, there's 2. One is Phoenix Astra, the other is Very Random Butterfly, whom you are somewhat acquainted with, I'm sure.
Possible.
But yeah, they both do art and animation.
Yeah. I kind of wanted to get into animation and 3D sculpting just for that,
Yeah, personally, I would vouch for, if you want to get into 3D and sculpting, there's this new version of my favorite free 3D animating program out there called Blender.
I actually downloaded Blender and opened it, and I was like, what the hell is this and how do I use it? Buttons and tools everywhere. I was like, oh my god.
Blender up till version 2.79 is very esoteric and very complicated and very low level. So you got to know a lot of like computer knowledge to use it. But Blender 2.8 and onwards is very user friendly. And I want to say that they just did a release candidate yesterday or today, but I also got a notification that the release candidate was delayed. But if you want to try out the beta for 2.8, it might be easier for you. Might be worth checking out. Fight scenes.
There we go. Growl, run! Oren screeched. Growl smiled, and new words escaped his lips. This fight scene, aside from the prologue, is my favorite one to write. Because I had to come up with the thing. Took me a little while to come up with it, and then I had to expand on this thing later.
Yeah. I mean, knowing now that I'm near the end of the book, it sounds like this would be a good time for a big climactic fight scene.
New words escaped his lips. Keeper of Greed, bind him. Massive golden chains ripped through the ground and wrapped themselves around Tharzar. They dug into the demon's legs, arms, torso, and neck. Tharzar screamed and flailed, outraged at the sudden assault. You wretched beast, just what are you? Growl grinned at Tharzar as the chains picked the demon up and slammed him into the ground, tightening their hold. Answer me, swine. Tharzar was beyond anger. Growl glared at the demon. Keeper of Wrath, punish him. Electricity ran through the chains and shocked Tharzar to his bones. Lightning rained from the sky and surged through the metal restraints, sending streaks of fire through the air and over the demon's body. Oren screwed his eyes shut. It was an awesome yet frightful display of power. He had never known the bear could do this. It chilled him to the bone. Oren, Cyrus's voice was low and rough. We have to smash the clock. Oren nodded. He and Cyrus picked themselves up and each put a hand on the blue key. They tried to turn it with all their might, but it wouldn't budge. Come on, Oren seethed. We didn't come this far only to be stopped by some rusted piece of junk. A chill blew through Oren and Cyrus. Junk, is it? The key swiftly turned, and Cyrus fell to the ground after losing his grip. Oren awkwardly tried to put his feet underneath them. What was that? Cyrus asked, his skin paling. I don't know, Oren replied. The key sank into the casing a little bit. It clicked once, and then once more. The key began spinning on its own, and then clicked a third time. It started disintegrating and vanished inside the clock. Gears turned and grinded loudly, some straining due to extensive rust. Others were whirling effortlessly. The casing split in half and tumbled down until it hit the ground with a loud clank. Tharzar turned his head. No, he screeched. He pulled against Growl's chain, stumbling to his feet. Tharzar reached out a hand and grabbed the vines. Growl's fury peaked, and the chains constricted Tharzar till his skin broke. Keeper of Pride, dethrone him. Growl's chains lifted Tharzar into the air and slammed him into the metal spikes sticking out of the ground. More chains ripped through the earth and impaled Tharzar through one side and out the other, piercing organs. A chain split through his side and exited out his right eye before coiling around his head, a gruesome sight. Tharzar writhed in agony, silver blood flowed from his body. I'll rip your heart out, filthy beast. Oren, Growl bellowed. It is now or never. Oren shouted in agreement and drew his sword. He raised it and held it level to the clock. Tharzar began crawling towards them with unholy determination. Oren, do it now, Cyrus yelled above the thunder. Oren's arms flexed, and he plunged the steel through the clock until he could push it no further. Tharzar screamed out in anguish. The clock went from bright silver to brown. It ceased ticking and cracked in several places. Then it burst into pieces. A shower of lightning racked the vines. Oren and Cyrus came tumbling through the air. Keepers, release! Salvage! Braille yelled. The chains binding Tharzar quickly unwound themselves and shot to Oren and Cyrus. They caught the two boys in a firm, static embrace. Braille approached them with concern bleeding through his eyes. He caught the boys in a furry hug. A wild howl echoed through the air. Tharzar grabbed his head and wheeled, slamming against the trees, his claws scraping his head. He fell to his knees, stretched a hand towards the sky, and fell to the ground. His remains turned black, and then the dead monster turned into smoke and ash, twisting skyward, floating away in the wind. Gudra laughed behind him. Great job, she said. Growl glared at her, but smiled as if he knew her. You, Oren breathed. He rushed up and grabbed her cloak. What are you trying to pull? He yelled. Gudra swatted his hands away and she yelled at him, anger evident in her voice. What am I trying to pull? What about you? You have no idea what your purpose really is, do you? You're so childish. Grow up. I haven't done anything. I'm just trying to help you. Is that really so terrible? You keep showing up wherever we are. Are you following us, Oren hissed. More like you're following me. That is Growl's job. If you want to blame it on someone, blame it on your stupid bear. She turned around and began to walk away. I don't need to prove or explain anything to you. Just do what you're told and you'll get through your life fine. Who exactly do you think you... Enough! I don't want to hear it. Just shut up and follow Growl's orders. Otherwise, you'll end up just like Tarzan. Is that a threat? Oren said. She laughed. No. She bent over and glared at him. It's a death sentence. Oren felt his insides freeze with fear. Gudra laughed and ran at his side. See you soon, she called out. She is very childish. She is uber childish as a character.
She's got a short temper, but at the same time, was it Oren that's threatening her? Or Cyrus?
It's Oren. He's like all in her face.
I would kind of expect Cyrus to, but then again, Cyrus is also a bit too spoiled to really run into conflict with someone more powerful.
Yeah. So, okay, so before I move on, because we got like 3 chapters left, what do you remember about Cyrus as a character?
I remember that he started out super spoiled and then grew up a little bit throughout the course of the journey. That's more or less the gist of it.
So, when you meet Cyrus in the 2nd chapter, he's the goody-goody boy of the village, okay?
Okay.
And then at the end of the 2nd chapter, Growl locks his soul in this other realm because he butchers this baby rabbit, okay? He's this goody-goody boy on the outside, and then just terrible character on the inside.
Yeah.
Oren is kind of the opposite. Oren is hated by everybody in his village, but he has a very, very good heart. He's extremely misunderstood, extremely lonely, needs a good friend, needs a mom to, pat on the back. Hasn't hurt anybody. He's never hurt anybody, but everyone thinks he's this awful, terrible person. Meanwhile, Cyrus hurts everything, and everyone thinks he's great. They're polar opposites.
All right.
When they, there's supposed to be some sort of lesson learned here growing up after Growl traps Cyrus's soul or whatever in this other realm. And it's implied that, this happens. And they talk about it in chapter 4 when they go back to Cyrus's village to pick him up to go on this journey. That while his body has physically aged and matured because he was in this realm, he never matured emotionally or socially or mentally because he was pretty much by himself. So he's like 18, 19, but he's still very much a kid in an adult's body.
All right.
And his complete lack of a character change is shown in chapter 6, 7, or 8 when they get to the maze, they get to the entrance, and they walk through the doors, and there's a baby bird on the ground that fell out of its nest, and Cyrus, following behind everyone else, sees it, and he steps on it. Sees it, gives it a good thought, and then crushes it. And Growl notices, doesn't say anything to him. Cyrus just wipes the bottom of his shoe off and then it keeps moving. And that's your cue in the book that nothing about Cyrus has changed, and he's still awful. And, for all intents and purposes, you are not supposed to like Cyrus.
Yeah.
No matter
I think I blanked on that particular scene. Yeah, I think I blanked on that particular scene, but I do remember getting the impression that, maybe he grew up a little, but maybe not.
Yeah, he's not meant to be liked.
Okay.
At all. You can choose to. People can choose to do what they want, but what's clearly shown, like, he's not going home. He's
still
very, not wishy-washy is not the right term.
Like he just seems to lack empathy for other things.
Yeah. Just everything is beneath him.
Yeah. And then we're gonna meet another character who sees everyone as beneath him, but also has the strength to back it up, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Chapter 12. Here we are, Chapter 12, Desert of the Dead. Snippet time. I was given a present today from my dearest companion, made from the silk robe belonging to our skeletal friend. So this snippet directly follows after the snippet in Chapter 11.
Alright.
This is right after Father Time shows up, and he's a skeleton, and he, like, he had it re-dyed to match my taste. It was still a robe, but instead of gold it was black, with shimmering red trimming along the edges, and a hood that would effectively cover most of my face. There was a small flap of fabric with an elastic string that could cover my mouth if I found it necessary. Now, another big part of the snippet. This description of this cloak should sound very similar. Okay, it's not the exact same description, but it's very close to the cloak that Gudra wears when you meet her in Chapter 5. There are a couple differences between this cloak and the cloak Gudra wears, but this is almost the exact same cloak.
Alright.
There was a small flap of fabric with an elastic string that could cover my mouth if I found it necessary. He told me, I have a feeling you'll be going on a journey. He was correct. There was sorrow in his eyes, and my heart almost broke when I saw it. He suddenly smiled, bright and hopeful. You'll return swiftly, though. I let my mask slip momentarily, sadness clearly portrayed. His smile faded, and I felt his heart and soul stiffen. You're coming home, right? I didn't answer, and his arms wrapped all the tighter around me. Oren watched Gudra's billowing cloak until it disappeared amid the trees and ivy hedges. He felt angry and flamed at her words. She had an uncanny way of striking at someone's nerves in just the right manner. It was her words and voice that made a man's courage and strength shrivel up like leaves in mid-fall. Oh, how Oren was beginning to hate that woman. The lightness of her step, the grace in every movement, the coyness in her words, the power in her stride, and that truly annoying fact that no matter how frustrating her actions were, or how hurtful her words, you couldn't stay angry with her for more than 3 seconds.
Sounds more like he's falling for her than anything.
If all women were like her, Oren never wanted to get married. Of course, there was also something pleasant and inviting in her manner. Warmth that seemed to hug you and reel you in close until it smothered you. It was a light that pierced even the darkest night. She seemed to dance on air as if her feet never touched the ground when she walked or ran or jumped, not even when she landed on the ground after flipping off the platform. Oren wondered if all women flipped when they jumped off the top of things, or if maybe she was more masculine than he originally thought. Oren couldn't help but smile at the thought of her. She was truly annoying, but so refreshing at the same time. How much longer do you intend to stare into space? Raoul said. Oren jumped at his voice. He eyed Raoul and laughed so hard he felt his insides were going to burst. Raoul simply grunted at the childish behavior. What happened to your fur? Oren said through tightly clenched teeth, trying to smother another outburst. Too much electricity, I think, Cyrus said, concealing his mouth. Please remember, Raoul is a lightning-based bear.
Yes.
He is a bear. That is lightning-based.
Yeah. I mean, the bear part's easy enough to remember. The lightning part...
Static is a huge problem in this equation. I hope you're enjoying this humorous moment while it lasts, Raoul said. Val's fur had become so filled with static from the lightning that it now stood straight up, making a giant puff of black. He was more of a large, circular blob with little feet poking out the bottom. It reminded Oren of his cat when he had thrown it into the air to see if it would really land on all fours. The cat landed in deep snow, and when it emerged, it was so frightened that it had become an icy white ball. Oren was scolded by his father and told never to throw the cat again. So, instead of throwing the cat, he threw the dead mice. It would have been alright if one mouse hadn't landed in Mirtha's blouse. recap, Martha is the lady who dies at, like, beginning or end. Like, somewhere in chapter 1. Which is what spurs Oren leaving.
Yeah.
Because they accuse him. She screamed so loudly, every man came running. That was the beginning of the fierce battle between the two of them. Oren had been 4, and Martha was somewhere near the age of 30. She had come from a wealthy family, but no man was interested in a snobby, high-minded woman who thought she was better than all the others because her coats were made of made from wolf fur instead of rabbit or bear. Oren turned and frowned at Growl. At that moment, Oren could have been wearing Growl's long-lost cousin. He didn't want to think of the fit Growl would throw if Oren's fine coat was endeared, the bear's family member. Please, Origin, make him ignorant, Oren prayed silently. Cyrus looked down the path. Now, see, this sentence, okay. Do you remember who Origin is in this story, in context of the story?
Origin?
Yes.
It wasn't one of the 2 first, fighters, was it?
Yes, it was.
Oh, it was, okay. It was the guy then?
No.
No?
No.
Oh no, the guy was the god of, shoot, he was just full of rage and war,
God
wasn't
of rage, yeah, Tora.
Yeah.
Tora.
So then it would be the girl.
Yep.
Of course.
So Origin is just the creator of everything. She's just aptly named the goddess of origin because she is the start.
Okay, yeah.
So whenever someone's praying to Origin, they're pretty much praying to their maker.
Yes.
Cyrus looked down the path the woman had run down. Maybe we should follow, he said. Oren frowned at him in dismay. Despite not being able to stay angry at Gudra, he didn't want to see her again. For heaven's glory, why? Oren snarled. Well, she seems to know where she's going, and she said she'd see us soon, Cyrus said, inching away. It was obvious that Oren was resentful of her. And if she's going the wrong way, then what? Oren said. Growl ignored them and started down the path. Cyrus, eager to escape Oren's burning gaze, quickly followed. Oren sighed, disappointed that once again he would have to tolerate her. He shifted his weight and walked quickly to regain his ground with the others. The way out of the maze was far easier and shorter than the way in. There were no distortions, fewer split paths, and Gudra had left trail markers for them to follow. Cyrus smiled at Oren, who was scanning the ground. Just say it and end your agony, Growl said. Oren shook his head. Cyrus continued to stare at him. Finally, Oren gave in. All right, she knows where she's going, and it was wise to follow her. Are you happy, Cyrus? Oren seethed. Quite, Cyrus said, whistling a tune. Oren watched the childish ginger and smacked him over the head. Cyrus looked at Oren in bewilderment. Wipe that smile off your arrogant face, Oren hissed. Oren walked ahead, and Cyrus stood still. Cyrus felt his sleeve being tugged as he was pulled along by the bear. Some right turns, left turns, and a curious roundabout brought them into an oval room with a wooden ceiling. Flowers lined the walls. 2 benches made from wood rested on either side of a marble fountain spewing the purest water Oren had ever seen. But half the fountain was dry and barren, as if water hadn't touched it in 1,000 years. A butterfly flitted in front of Oren's eyes and drifted towards a purple petal. Other butterflies began to follow, and soon every flower had a small insect on it. Their wings were gold, blue, green, pink, and white, like light reflecting through a prism window. They filled their small stomachs and floated into the air in unison. They spiraled around the room, and it seemed as if they were dancing. All the colors drifted higher and higher until they disappeared among the clouds, until their silent songs were lost on the wind. Oren sat down on a bench, wanting to rest, to gather his thoughts. Cyrus snuck over and carefully swiped Oren's filed claw from his bag. Quick recap, chapter 5 or 6. When they pick up Cyrus, he has a beard, and he wants to shave it, and Growl tells him no, because if he shaves it, people will recognize him in his village, and the whole goal is to get him out of the village without people recognizing him.
Yeah.
So a filed claw is a filed slave claw, and it's pretty much what people in this world use to shave.
Yes.
Where was I? I've lost it now. Another quick recap. Slaves are these reptilian wolfy creatures that you encounter, like chapters 2, 3, 4, 5. Cyrus shaved using the water in the fountain. He noticed that as he cleaned his grime-covered face in the water never seemed to get dirty. It was a curiosity, to say the least, but Cyrus paid it no mind and turned around to look at Oren, a smile on the energetic, red-haired man's face. "So, what do you think?" Cyrus said, beaming. Oren looked at him for a split second and returned to his thoughts. "You look the same," he muttered. Cyrus's eyebrow twitched in annoyance, the large grin still present on his face. "I think I look young," Cyrus huffed. "You are young," Oren mused. "I'm older than you." Oren glanced up at Cyrus. "You have the maturity of a 5-year-old, he said, a grim smile slithering across his face. Cyrus stamped his foot and marched away, Oren's eyes digging to his back. Growl crossed the room and waited quietly at the other end. Oren and Cyrus followed. As they left the chamber, Cyrus turned to look back. One butterfly remained. It was red with black spots. It fluttered up towards the fountain and vanished within the small ripples. The light seemed to fade now that all the winged dancers were gone. They walked into a stone room, its ceiling a thin slab of marble. Another massive double door with flecks of paint on it stood at the end. The door grinded open, sand brushing along the cracked surface of the floor. Growl was first to step into the harsh light of day. Sand shifted around his feet and the wind howled noisily. Oran and Cyrus shielded their eyes from the desert sun. "How did we go from a maze with grass and butterflies to sand and heat?" Cyrus said, kicking a small dune. "That's the way it is on this world," an all too familiar voice chimed. Oran groaned with despair and turned to see Gudra sitting gingerly on a weathered rock. She stood and flapped her coat to get the loose sand out. "Every region of this world is centered on a shrine village. In the middle of this blasted desert is the famed Shrine of Usher." Quiz not like the singer. "Quiz time, Cyrus. Who is the Shrine of Usher dedicated to? Please tell Oren, seeing as he's the only one within 1,000,000 miles who knows nothing of the gods or goddesses," Gudra said loudly. "For your information, Oren protested. She raised a hand to Oren, commanding him to remain silent. Cyrus shouted over the wind. "Dedicated in what is believed to be over 8,000 years, the Shrine of Usher is one of the oldest shrines ever made. Statues of Usher, the god of earth, were uncovered 12,000 years ago, suggesting that something else may have stood in the village's place beforehand." "What, like a temple for the god of earth?" Oren said. "What do you know about temples?" Braille asked. "Nothing, really. There is a rumor that the temple laid beneath the Lake of Tears in the Shrine of Silas. It was never proved. The ice is too thick and the water too cold. Of course it was never proven. What did I expect? Here I was hoping that some faith may have remained for." Gudra stopped. Braille had kicked her in the leg. Her rambling had been noticed. "You were saying?" Oren said. Her gaze flitted over to Raoul, who shook his head. "Nothing. However, did you notice the way the climate changed when you were halfway between your shrine village and his?" she said, pointing at Cyrus. "It became hotter, more humid," Oren said. "Exactly. It is the same here. That maze is the midway point between shrines. The midway point between the Shrine of Silas and the Shrine of Aros is a pond that is half frozen and half thawed. A forest resides on both sides, one covered in snow and the other covered in ash. If you remember, that is the same pond and very small clearing when you and I first met." "Half of the fountain was dry," Oren said. "That half represented the dirt beyond," Raoul said. "I remember that pond. You gave me the key there. Cyrus was resurrected there, and my father said that once I had been born by its waters, I was told that my mother drank from it to calm her down." "She drank from," Gudra sputtered. Suddenly she burst into laughter. "So it is you. You are the child. How interesting," she said. "Well, Raoul, now it should make sense why he can hear you when you're silent. You're a child of both the flame and freeze. This day keeps getting better and better. Quick recap. It's been directly shown at least 3 or 4 times that, not intentionally, Oren can read other people's minds. Up to this point, that's happened a couple times.
Yeah.
"And the sun is setting. We should go," Raoul said. Oren stood perplexed by the sudden interaction and use of words. Gudra turned towards the distance and tried to break into a run across the sand. Before she could move 2 inches, Oren grabbed her by the upper arm. She snarled, teeth like fangs flashing. She grabbed Oren's wrist and twisted, bringing him to his knees before she shoved him face first into the sand. "Don't touch me," she hissed. Gudra let go of Oren's wrist and sped away, allowing Oren to raise his head swiftly as he coughed at the sand he had been forced to swallow. As Gudra ran, she turned around. "Growl, there is no need for unscheduled meetings. Take them around the shrine, by the runes of silence." Her figure vanished with the wind and sand. "Cyrus, history lesson on the runes of silence," Oren snapped, picking at grains of sand on his tongue. Cyrus smiled and followed Growl as the bear trudged forward, his feet sinking every now and then. The runes of silence. Not much is written on them. All that remains of them, according to rumor, is a large stone archway. They were named the runes of silence because apparently there's no sound when you're near them. No one has been able to document anything on the archway, though. They say that people run away screaming about voices. Apparently near the arch, there was an inscription that said the archway was called the Gate of Trials. Don't ask why, I don't know. "Why does she want us to pass through that area, Growl?" Oren turned his head towards the bear. Growl remained silent. It seemed there was something he was not allowed to say. Oren was determined to find out what, if anything. The runes belonged to the Shrine of Usher. "Cyrus, what does Usher govern over besides earth and sand?" "Well, it was written he was ordered by Origin to test the apprentices before they could become a god or goddess. Despite belief, it is said that Usher was the first apprentice that Origin accepted, not ours, though not proven. The gods and goddesses were supposed to pass through an ancient door known as the Gate of Trials, located at something called the Vessian." Oren smiled. "You needed a book to find that out?" Cyrus clutched his book defensively, cradling it like a precious child. He turned his back to Oren slightly, deflecting the imaginary verbal blows against his literary pride and joy. "I didn't know that the gate in the Runes of Silence was linked with Usher," Cyrus reported. "How could you not? This is his region," Oren huffed. "That doesn't mean he knows everything about it," Braille said. Oren stared at the bear's back. "Are you going to answer my question?" he said. Braille smiled. "If you're trying to give your words that subtle edge that makes that hot-headed girl so threatening and scary, you're failing miserably." Oren grunted in defiance. Cyrus chuckled at Raoul's answer. Oren would never have the sharp, sword-like blade that Gudra's words did. She was clever as a witch and sinister as a demon, or demoness in this case. Yet, it seemed behind that cold, hard exterior, she was fragile on the inside. Fragile as she seemed, she put up one heck of a charade, acting tough and strong. Was it her strength or was it her weakness? So many things about her were unclear, so many questions remained unanswered. Oren would ask Growl, but he seemed negligent to answer anything concerning Gudra. In fact, he seemed somewhat afraid of her, though he was capable of ordering her to remain silent. Oren decided to pressure Growl with questions anyway. "So," he began, "what do you know about that woman?" Growl glanced back at him. "Why do you assume I know anything?" Oren narrowed his eyes. "She talks to you as if you're an old friend. Also, you order her around quite a bit." Growl laughed. "You think I could order her around? She'd rip my heart out if I tried." Oren smiled. "So you do know her?" Growl ceased walking and turned to face Oren. "Yes, I know her. Why does it concern you? Why should it matter?" "Who is she? What is she?" Growl smiled. "What do you mean, what is she? What do you suspect her of being? She seems human to me. Do you think different?" Oren grinded his teeth together, frustrated by Growl's ability to slither away from answering questions directly. "Stop messing with me." "I'm not. You're making this bigger than it actually is." "Just answer me. You keep wiggling away from the truth like a worm." Growl chuckled. "Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle, stop. Wiggle, 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 stop." Oren's eyes widened. "Sometimes I keep forgetting you're not human." "Who said I'm not human?" Oren took a step back. Was Growl suggesting that he wasn't actually a bear? That wasn't possible. Growl may have the extraordinary ability to use human speech and possess the smarts of a human, along with being fairly wise, but he was a bear in every physical aspect. Oren had seen his paws firsthand, and they didn't appear to have any hidden opposable thumbs. "What is it you're saying?" "I don't recall saying anything," Growl said. "Cyrus, does that oversized encyclopedia of yours have anything on shapeshifters?" Cyrus looked up at Oren in surprise. "Shapeshifters? Let me take a look." Cyrus flipped the pages until he found what appeared to be an index. He scanned the page, following his finger into the S section. Cyrus then grabbed at the book and flipped through it. He smiled, suggesting that he had found what he was looking for. Shapeshifters, a being in possession of the ability to alter his or her form into any other being of any type. The form of shifting is chosen by the being at the respective age of 12 when the body is prepared to undergo the first transformation ceremony. These ceremonies are painful, but physical change after that is painless and can occur in an instant. In some cases, a shapeshifter may decide to live out the remainder of his or her days as the chosen alternate form, which results in a permanent change that cannot be undone. The only known way of detecting a shapeshifter is by the color of their blood, which is silver. Like Tharzar, Oren said. Cyrus, what kind of monster is the one Tharzar chose to be? Oren asked. Cyrus flipped through the pages, brown and fading, edges creasing easily underneath his fingertips. The species that Tharzar copied is known as the Ugly Demon. They usually live alone, feasting on pigs, goats, sheep, and an occasional human. They have large iron maces with them, though it's only for decoration. They never actually used it. The Ugly Demons have been named the Chickenfoot Ox. It's a fitting name, all things considered. Oren looked at Growl and smiled creepily, lightly touching the hilt of his sword. You keep that thing away from me, or else, Growl snarled. Or else what? Oren sneered. Growl took 2 giant steps forward so that he towered over Oren, his shadow stretching across the ground. Or else, he snarled, you'll find out if you try. Then just answer me straight. Are you a shapeshifter? Growl's muscles eased from their tension and he backed away. No, he said, I am not. I never have been anything but a bear. Now I would appreciate it if you would follow me. We still have a fairly long way to go until we reach our destination. The sands will shift soon, and we don't want to be on solid ground. And we want to be on solid ground when they do. Cyrus, what does he mean the sands will shift? Cyrus flipped through his book again to the geography section of the desert. When the sands of the desert shift, that means that the entire landscape changes. In the morning, the desert will appear flat and even. By midday, dunes will have formed almost everywhere. At night, just before the sun sets, the ground shifts and the sands cease to exist, revealing rocky ground and deep, endless chasms. Many people have been known to fall prey to these bottomless pits, for the sands conceal them perfectly until they are stepped upon. On rare but fatal occasions, the rocky ground will fall away. Many believe that eventually the chasms will spread so far that no ground will be left, but this is mere speculation. And now you know why I would like to be at the Gate of Trials before sunset, Growl hissed. Oren glared at him with distrust. You could have mentioned that beforehand. Growl looked at him. Would you have acted any differently towards me? Oren flinched. Even though simple, Growl's words were still harsh. Also, Growl was right. Oren probably would still have had the same attitude with him. It made sense now why Growl was so quiet. He was focused on leaving the sands behind. The Desert of the Dead was well named. If it was true that sands gave way to endless pits of darkness, swallowing everything they claimed, then Oren, as well as Growl, did not want to be here when the sands disappeared. Oren looked at the sky. Twilight was close. The blue sky was beginning to fade away into deeper shades. How much farther is this gate? Cyrus flipped through his book again. According to this, we should first pass by a sign. We already did, Growl said. What did the sign say? Oren asked. Turn back, Growl mused. Oren raised an eyebrow. He hadn't seen any signs, but then again, Oren hadn't really been paying attention. Should we listen to it? No, Growl replied curtly. Cyrus hid a small smile on his shoulder. Growl was obviously tired, and therefore grumpy. Seeing his childish display was proving to be slightly amusing, and it distracted Cyrus from thinking of home, of possibly dying, and of all the unknown factors in front of him. He followed closely behind Oren, who stayed a foot or two away from them. Cyrus swore he could feel it, the pulsating of the earth. He could feel it beneath his shoes, vibrating into the soles of his feet, up his legs and ribs, and into his head. He wanted to stoop down, press his ear to the sand, and listen for the heartbeat he knew had to exist. He looked up to the sky and saw the vibrant shades of blue begin to melt into a creamy, thick orange. The orange was met with a candy pink and a light, brilliant lilac. Cyrus wondered what this moment looked like from the stars. If a being was staring down at their little planet, what did this gorgeous array of colors look like to them? Cyrus jumped, his breath hitched. He could not have imagined it, that painful, hot throbbing beneath his feet. It had to be real. It was too vivid not to be. Forgetting all about Growl and Oran, he dropped to the ground, pressing his hands and face against the sand. He waited in anxious anticipation, waited perfectly quiet and still. Suddenly, his cheek felt as if it had been slapped with a wet wooden spoon. He recoiled and then instantly pressed his face back down. It was not the heat of the sand that scorched him, but rather a pulsing coming from down below. He could feel it, the planet's heartbeat. It was soft, steady, a low humming, almost like the purring of a cat. Yet every so often it would surge to life, beating against its rocky body like cannon fire. Cyrus felt it in his hands, and despite the pain, he kept his palms pressed flat against the ground, taking in the interesting sensation of the way the ground seemed to wiggle and slide beneath his fingers. The more he felt, the more unsettled he became. It occurred to him that the planet was far too beautiful, too peaceful for this throbbing heart to belong to it. This heartbeat he felt was angry, violent. It couldn't belong to this world. Cyrus pressed his face firmly against the sand, ignoring the fact that it was curling into his ear. He listened intently, waiting. Something flashed in his vision, a scene he had never encountered before. A vision of his home burned to a crisp, of the whole world itself cracking apart and caving in on its hollowed-out shell. A monster ripping through the earth, dragging everything it touched into the pits of hell. Flesh being strewn across the ground, and creatures Cyrus knew didn't exist feasted on it. A scream ripped through Cyrus, and he fell back. Oren and Growl turned to him with a start, each ready to pounce on the unseen threat. Cyrus's face was twisted in fear, confusion, and some other emotion that couldn't be recognized by anyone present. "What's wrong?" Growl asked harshly. Cyrus stuttered, his voice lost. You didn't hear it?" Growl's brow furrowed. "Hear what?" Cyrus looked around, bewildered. "The screaming! From down there!" Growl flinched but remained composed. "Screaming?" Cyrus nodded weakly. "Did you hear anything else?" Growl asked quietly. Cyrus looked at the ground. A heartbeat. And I saw something. Growl moved closer to Cyrus, sitting down in front of him. "What did you see?" the bear asked softly. Cyrus looked up into his huge brown eyes that were soft and strong at the same time. He opened his mouth, and tears bubbled in his eyes. "Cyrus?" Oren said. He moved closer and squatted down just behind Growl. "I saw it," Cyrus breathed. "The end of the world." Growl recoiled, his eyes widening. "What do you mean?" "I saw the ground break apart and fall. I saw all the cities and villages burn. I saw the sea turn to blood and people being skinned alive. There was a monster, a huge demonic creature. It came out of the ground and destroyed everything." Growl watched Cyrus carefully. "What color was it?" Cyrus tilted his head to one side. "What? What color was this creature that was in the ground?" Cyrus lowered his head, trying to recall that small detail among the flashes of pictures going through his mind. "Red, I think? It must have been red. A dark red, maybe even purple." Growl took a deep breath and held it. His lips twitched, his fur stood on end. All of a sudden he could feel it, the heartbeat Cyrus talked about. He could feel it drumming beneath his paw pads, soft and steady, then violently and hot. Growl looked down at the sand, rage slowly stretching across his face, his gums pulling back to reveal the sharp white canines that lined his jaw. Oran watched Growl intently, slowly inching away as if the bear would explode right there. Growl slammed a paw into the ground, his fur growing darker, and his eyes flaring. "Quiet, you pig." Cyrus looked at Growl, completely bewildered, but he did notice that the beating beneath him became dull. It practically disappeared, but Cyrus knew that despite no longer feeling it, it was still there. Growl had forced it into remission, but it would surely return in its own time. Oran stood up, wiping the sand from his pants. "Will someone please explain what's going on?" Growl shook his head. "Don't worry about it. It's not something you need to deal with." Oran raised an eyebrow.
All right, I guess. Cyrus stood up shakily, using Rail as a crutch. Rail slowly turned, and the trio began walking. Oren watched them from behind, analyzing every movement. Cyrus leaned into Rail. What was that? What was what? Rail said, glancing at the red-haired boy. That thing in the ground. What was that screaming down there? Rail looked straight ahead. Nothing you can help. But what? Cyrus pressured. Rail sighed deeply and looked at him. A demon. The worst kind. The kind that wants to consume everything in its path. Cyrus scanned the text. Oh, sorry. There was a break here. You know that thing they do in books where they stop a paragraph and then they put, like, an extra space between the next paragraph, and it's supposed to denote that some kind of, like, brief time skip has happened?
Yeah, I've seen that done as, like, 3 little stars, or a separator line.
Yeah, so I did that.
Okay.
Separator line, next paragraph. We've moved forward a little bit in time.
Mm-hmm.
Cyrus scanned the text. We're not too far off. In fact, we should be able to see it once we reach the top of this dune. Oren lifted his hand to his brow. The sun was almost gone, but still bright and blinding. Is that it? Oren asked, pointing towards a looped shape? Yeah, Oren asked, pointing towards a looped shape. Oren's finger traveled across the sands and past several dunes. In the distance was a tall archway. Fallen columns sat in the sands, and a few more sat atop the stone circle where the archway rested. Parts of the top of the archway were missing, and an old, rusty chain was looped around one side, with an immense lock lying on the ground next to the end of it. The lock still had small flecks of blue and gold on it, showing that the archway may have been the door to a much bigger complex at some point. Even at a distance, the archway was Sorry. The archway was large enough so that these details could be seen. Rail shifted his weight and carefully trudged down the sand dune, making sure he didn't fall or slip. Hurry up, he grunted. Oren and Cyrus took heavy steps down the dune, each foot sinking deeper into the sand. Cyrus had some trouble keeping his balance in the unsteady area, and fell more than once. The dunes were steep, no matter which side you went up or down. Oren drove his hands into the sand to help him climb the dunes, for his strength was starting to get low. When descending, Cyrus had finally decided to slide down on his back, though his shirt was full with sand when he was done. As Cyrus flapped his shirt, trying to get the sand out, a withered piece of plant fell out as well. Cyrus stopped what he was doing and looked down at it. Suddenly, a fresh green vine shot out from within the withered thing and wrapped around his leg. Cyrus screamed in alarm, catching the attention of Rail and Oren. The vine became thicker, and roots started to grow into the dry sand. "What is this thing?" Cyrus screeched as his book and short swords dropped from his person. The plant grew incredibly fast, both in size and length. It picked Cyrus up into the air, where he swung upside down. Oren picked up the book from the sand and began flipping through it. It's called the Shezzer. Their seed pods are grown off the plants called dream mist. However, they can only thrive in dry, hot climates. In that respect, they are rarely ever seen. They were nicknamed the Man-Eater, Oren read, squinting his eyes at the text. Well, that's absolutely wonderful. Now, Oren, look in that big book of all-knowing, perfectly helpful information and tell me, how do I kill it? Cyrus hollered. Oren searched the text furiously. It doesn't say. How odd. Cyrus's eyes nearly popped from their sockets. Odd? I don't care if it's odd. Help me, fool, he yelled. Help yourself, Oren said, closing the book and throwing Cyrus's short swords towards him. Cyrus caught them, unsheathed one, and sliced the vine holding him, dropping to the sand. He pushed himself up and away, stumbling around on the thick sand. The severed vine withered around, smashing into the ground. Please, can we worry about this thing later? Apparently they're not mobile, Oren said. Growl nodded, and they all ran from the plant until they were sure it wouldn't be able to reach them with its surprisingly long roots. The arch still seemed to be miles and miles away, as if while they tried to get closer, the arch inched away, although more could clearly be seen. The Gate of Trials had iron, claw-like grips holding it to the floor. The grips were built around the base of the arch and seemed to drill into the ground. Whoever made this wasn't confident it wouldn't fall over. Rail huffed. You misunderstand the point of those iron bases, he said. Cyrus narrowed his eyes. Then explained. Ralph chuckled. In time, my friend. Oren's back was hot and damp. He turned around to let the desert wind hit his face. It was somewhat refreshing, considering that even the wind was hot and dry. Oren opened his eyes and looked out over the sky. It was black directly above him, but as he stared closer to the horizon, it became pink, red, and a light shade of orange. It was a peaceful sight, a sight which smacked Oren with harsh realization. He spun around to face Growl, who had stopped momentarily. Time is not something we have right now. Growl glanced in his direction. I am already aware of this, he said. It hadn't occurred to Oren to ask why Growl had stopped with such precious time wasting away. About a foot in front of Growl's sharp, bare claws, the sand had trickled away like an hourglass, revealing part of a large, deep chasm. Sand continued to slowly but surely pour away, unveiling more and more, and the jagged hole in the earth's surface. Cyrus looked around to see how far they were from safe, solid ground. Wasn't there a dune behind us? Cyrus mused quietly. Oren looked in the direction that Cyrus had stated and became confused. Cyrus was right. Oren could clearly remember a dune being there, casting a shadow down on them, but now it had vanished into thin air, or into deep ground. Suddenly, Oren was lifted into the air. Oren squirmed like a snake, kicking his legs and scraping his hands to the sky. Stop moving! Oren ceased movement and looked below him. 2 furry paws were latched around his waist, with 2 furry feet on the ground. A big, moist nose was blowing hot air on the back of his legs. Oren flinched involuntarily. Wow, Cyrus said, delight burning in his green eyes. Lift me up too, Growl, he said, stretching his hands above his head in the same way Growl was holding Oren up. Growl, being a bear with human-like attributes, had good balance. He had stood up on 2 feet to give Oren a clear view of their surroundings. Are you on drugs? Oren yelled. Put me down. What do you see? Ralph snorted. Oren stopped his shouting long enough to scan the area. Oh. The sand that had once made up the desert was rapidly disappearing. Large cracks and fissures could be seen spanning out all over the place. Oren then hit the ground with a loud thud. What was that for? He said, rubbing his back. Don't move, Ralph hissed. Why not? Oren said, glaring up at him. Growl leered at Oren. You're sitting on top of the largest chasm on the entire planet, known as Riddle's End. Oren turned pale and looked down. It was true. The sand was starting to show the opening of a large drop that went right beneath his feet. Riddle's End was a chasm that was at least 4 miles long and stretched 30 feet wide, a deadly and well-hidden trap. Won't sitting here be worse? Oren said. The more you move, the faster the sand disappears. They should rename this desert, Oren hissed. Growl chuckled. I agree. Cyrus sighed. We were so close, he mused. Growl looked behind him. It was true. They were only about 20 feet from the arch. 20 feet that could probably be covered with one quick sprint. But in Oren's current predicament, that dash might not be possible. Oren narrowed his eyes. Growl narrowed his eyes. Where are you when I need you? He growled. Growl, what is that? It seemed like nothing more than a small hill of sand, of course. It was growing inside, slowly becoming larger and larger, and was moving towards Oren. The bump then disappeared. The ground began to vibrate, shaking violently, and then becoming still again. All Oren could see was sand, like it was raining dirt, but Oren knew that sand didn't fall out of the sky. This sand seemed to be alive. It was moving, and had 8 legs, and brown, glowing markings all over it. Oren couldn't remember when the sand had become hairy and white, almost gray, but not quite. Once again, sand covered everything, and he could hear Growl shouting, Fessor! Who was Fessor? Did he mean this blob of moving sand? It took Oren a while to realize that he was no longer moving, but laying on a rock. A large broken iron chain was just within reach. Oren forced himself into a sitting position. Large furry paws grabbed at Oren's waist, setting him on his feet. Do you hurt anywhere? Growl asked. Cyrus was running around with a crazed but happy look on his face. I'm fine. What's wrong with Cyrus? Oren said, raising an eyebrow. He's having a heavenly experience of realizing he's one of the few people to come this close to the Gate of Trials, though he's overreacting. Oren peered up at Ral's big brown eyes. Who is Fesser? No one important. Oren followed at Ral's big bare feet as he walked away. Is he an animal like you? Oren asked. Ral looked at Oren before answering. In time, my friend. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go stop Cyrus from destroying an ancient monument in the name of history, discovery, and so forth. Oren laughed a little. While Ral was right, Cyrus was getting a little too carried away, dusting the rubble to see the stonework clearly and chipping away at stones to see if there were any hidden gems within. Oren remembered something else about the sand. Not only were there 8 legs, but there had been sticky, silk-like threads and a pair of fangs with liquid dripping off the end. Oren immediately thought of a spider, but there was no way that a spider could become big enough for someone to ride on one. Well, well, you made it at last, a voice chimed. I see you made it too, Oren hissed. Gudra paused before answering. I don't think you like me very much, she pouted. You could have helped us, Oren said. Gudra laughed. Earth to Oren, I did help you. Just ask Ral. You'd be dead without me. If you helped us here, then tell me who Fester is. No can do. Why not? Oren couldn't see her eyes, but he could feel them staring at him, almost digging into his very soul. In time, my friend, she said. Oren would have yelled at her, but she was so serious it almost made him go numb. She was sitting on top of the arch, kicking her legs back and forth. On her 5th kick, she fell backwards and flipped through the air, landing on her feet so lightly that she didn't even disturb the sand beneath her. I think I shall stay with you for a little while, she said, looking out over the desert. Why did you leave that plant alive? Oren was a little surprised that she knew about that plant monster, but then again, she had been sitting on an arch which gave a very clear view of the terrain. Why does it matter? Oren asked. Because, she said, extending her hand in front of her. A small red orb of light started to grow at the center of her palm. You shouldn't have left it there. The red orb grew and shot off so fast it couldn't be seen, towards the Shezzer. No one could see the impact, but they saw the effect. The ground shook and fire spewed into the air. An explosion sent sand, rock, and pieces of the Shezzer flying into the sky. The flames writhed around and sent shadows cascading down into the growing chasms. The earth rumbled and broke, falling away into the endless black pits. Gudra had just blown a crater into the earth, swallowing what little land had originally been there, resulting in the Riddle's End's expansion by at least another 30 feet. Oren and Cyrus gawked at her in amazement. How did you do that? Cyrus said, completely fascinated with her sudden ability to detonate objects at will. Gudra laughed. That's not all I can do. However, those secrets are for later, she said, concealing a smile beneath the dark fabric of her cloak. She motioned for them to follow her. So where do you want us to go now? Cyrus said. One more step and you're there, she said. Gudra walked over to the stone door at the end of a large circular platform past the arch. Don't talk to the voices, she said quietly. Ral grabbed Oren and Cyrus with his paws and moved them forward. It was true what people had said about the arch. Voices could be heard around them. Oren kicked some sand up, but he didn't even hear his boots scrape across the ground. It really is silent here, he said to himself. Hence the name, the Ruins of Silence, home to the Gate of Trials, Cyrus said proudly. He had done his homework, Oren was well aware of that. Unless you built it, stop bragging, Gudra said. She pressed her hand against the stone surface and mumbled something softly. A crust appeared on the door, and it cracked in two. Let me guess. The Throne of Usher? Oren said, eyeing the jagged, symmetrical pattern. Gudra turned to him and smiled, but she said nothing to him. This surprised Oren. It was something she hadn't done before, and completely out of character. The stone slid apart, grinding into sand as it scraped along the ground. Gudra walked into the bright opening and disappeared. Oren hesitated as Ral shoved him closer. Don't be a chicken, Cyrus said, pushing his shoulder. Oren looked at Cyrus and coughed. Cyrus was, as they said, a pot calling the kettle black. He put on a brave face, but anyone could see that he was shaking all down his spine, like an unstable pillar ready to topple over at any second. Oren smiled at him and on the back. I'm fine, he said, but you look like you're about to cry. Cyrus flinched and hit Oren's arm. I am not crying.
I just got some dirt in my eye. Oren looked around him. Speaking of sand, he said, it's all gone. Cyrus gazed out over the desert. It was true, all the sand had vanished. It had fallen beneath the earth, and great chasms with jagged openings had taken its place. Growl looked at the sky. It was beginning to turn a dark blue with small flecks of red and light pink near the sliver of sunlight that remained. Oren looked towards the new source of light. They had gotten closer to the door, but the entrance still seemed so far away, as if it was a path with no end. Growl continued to push him and Cyrus along the weathered stone. The wind picked up a few pebbles and pelted them against the large arch, which was shrinking as the trio progressed towards the stone door. The wind was strong, but still, in the rooms of silence, nothing made a sound. It was a perfect silence that not even a war could disrupt. Oren began to wonder if Usher was silent as well, if he was solitary and reclined like these ruins. Oren, go, Growl said. Oren looked up into the light-filled opening. It seemed even brighter than before. He looked back at the arch and the evening sky. Stars were beginning to appear like specks of white paint on a black canvas. A hand grabbed his wrist. Gudra's head poked through, and she smiled again, a sweet smile of comfort and kindness. She tugged on Oren and pulled him through. The light seemed to last forever, and there was a warmth with it. A fresh, cool breeze rustled Oren's hair. Oren's eyes opened, and as he held his breath at the sight, Cyrus stepped through and nearly lost his balance. Braille followed after Cyrus and chuckled at their faces. Their reactions were perfect, one of a kind. Gudra danced and spun in front of them, her cloak billowing out behind her in the wind's forceful breeze. She twirled towards Oren and laughed when she saw his face. She grabbed his wrist and spun him in a large circle before releasing him and watching him roll on the green grass and land in a small bed of pink and white flowers. Yes, Oren, places like this do exist. Chapter 13. The Valley of Wind. Snippet time. My student kept falling behind, stumbling on the sand and earth. I urged him to keep pace. Night was falling, and he has no tolerance for the cold. I, on the other hand, love the winter chill. I could lie on the ice and sleep if I wanted to. When we made it to the Vestion, he marveled at the size of the doors, and even more at the architecture inside. I pushed him into the first room, and the test began. Now he could not leave, and none could enter. I heard Usher above us, his voice unsure as he gave instructions to my student. They were all watching, even my dearest love. I could feel his soul shaking with uncertainty. If there was anything I could do to ease his worries, I would do it. I would lay down my life to give him peace. I may very well end up having to. Questions were running through Oren's mind like little mice running on small metal wheels. It was a beautiful sight. The sky was blue and stretched on forever, as if it had no end. The grass was green and lush, full of life, and it smelled wonderful. The wind was strong. The wind was strong, and everything swayed and danced in its wake. Oren lifted himself into a sitting position. Gudra laughed and skipped over to him. She ran her fingers through his hair, picking all the pink and white flower petals out. She bent down and grabbed a handful of flowers, sniffing them. She smiled and put them in front of Oren's nose. He glanced up at her before smelling them. Their fragrance was sweet. Oren gazed out over the valley. It was green and spotted with large circles of white and pink, yellow and red, and purple and blue here and there. Off to the right and left, and in front of Oren, were two mountain peaks covered with snow. Oren turned around and saw another mountain peak stretching into the sky beyond the clouds, so high he couldn't see the top. Oren looked all around, seeing only sky, and he realized that this expansion of land was not on ground level, that it was tens of thousands of feet in the air. Oren knew this because the plant that the woman had just made him sniff was a rare plant called pade, which could only be found in places of extremely high elevation. And there was only one place that wasn't ground level on the first world. In this sacred place, a lush valley was nestled on a mountain with 3 peaks far above the ground. That plant, Oren said, looking at Gudra. It only grows above 10,000 feet. Where are we exactly? You are on a mountain. You're not on the top, but you're not anywhere near the bottom either. You're in between. This mountain has 3 different peaks. Wedged in between these peaks, far above the ground, is a plateau, a valley of sorts, she said. We're on a mountain, Oren said, amazed. He had paid enough attention in school when he was younger to know that there was only one single mountain in all of the First World that didn't reside near any ocean and didn't erupt every few years. It rested in the middle of the land and rose so high, people said it stretched into the clouds, even into space. Were they really standing on the same mountain that stories said was the holy ground of Sate, the goddess of wind? Oren looked at the back of the door that had closed behind them. A new crust was on its surface. Oren guessed it was the Gales of Sate. It was an elegant design, but simple, far more simple than some of the other crests. There were less individual shapes involved. On this side of the stone door, vines of ivy grew around it. The door still had some paint on it. Flecks of light green were on the crest, and gold could be seen as well. The crest flashed once and disappeared until someone would call on the door to open. Oren again looked out over the valley. Even at this height, he couldn't see the top of the 3rd peak. He wondered if this was the fabled mountain peak that stretched into the cosmos, the Heaven's Bridge. It seemed that it could touch the surface of the moon. Impressive, isn't it? A young voice chimed. Oren looked up at Gudra in her billowing cloak. This is the highest valley in the First World, resting between the 3 peaks of the summit of spring. It was named so because here, in the land of Sate, it is always spring. Snow never falls and rain is always abundant.
I'm just thinking this is a really good place to be in Secret of Mana while listening to this book. Because there's 4 adjacent maps that show the same area in the 4 seasons. Summer, winter, spring, and fall. And for the most part, this area is in spring.
Oh, nice. Yeah, there's some lore behind why this world is set up the way that it is. The door is the only way to get from the desert to this valley. The mountain cannot be climbed, she said. But where is the desert, Oren asked. She looked down at him and then pointed down below the clouds. Through the puffs of white, Oren could see a vast extension of land, but no desert. I don't see it, he said. The woman sighed. That's exactly the point. There are 2 continents on this world. Only 2, and they are separated by the ocean. Shouldn't we have hit a midway point then? Oren asked. The maze was the midway point between the desert and this mountain, although it is out of place for a midway point, the woman said. Then what lands rest on this continent? Cyrus asked, walking up behind them. On your continent, there are the shrines of Aros, Stilus, Usher, and Kryptos. This continent has the shrines of Sate, Vashire, Dunatra, and Osaya. Technically, the Ocean of 2 Worlds is under Osaya's control, but they say she split the ownership with Stilus. That is why half of the year the ocean freezes, Growl said. The Ocean of 2 Worlds, Oren said. Yes, the ocean that covers this planet. They say that the ocean has no bottom, and it leads straight to hell. Of course, that's only speculation and stories made up to entertain little children, Gudra said. Growl looked at her with disapproval. Oren continued to look at the clouds. The land below seemed so small. He could even see the salty sea. Oren turned his gaze toward the heavens. It was true. This mountain stretched beyond the clouds, maybe even farther to places no one could see or go. I wonder why the continents are separate, Oren said to himself. The woman smiled. Think about it, she said. If there was a war between 2 celestial beings, what do you think would happen to the human population? Oren looked at her, curious. Do you mean to say that this continent fought under one being during the war, while the other continent pledged allegiance to another being? Then they were separated onto different lands to avoid further conflict, Cyrus said. No, but the followers of Torah wanted a mountain stronghold, so the gods flooded the eastern edge of the world. Now there's no need for it, seeing as all the followers of the evil god are dead. It was done for protection, and we, being mere mortals in the presence of such power, have no room to argue about it. It is what it is, Rouse said, looking up at the blue and pink sky. The 3 of us may be mortal, but I don't know about you, Gudra said, laughing to herself. And you've got it all backwards. The continental split had nothing to do with followers or the war. It happened at the conclusion of the war. Well, clearly we went to different schools. Also, do you mean to put yourself among the ranks of the weak, my dear? Growl said with a sly smile on his face. The woman reached up, took Growl's ears between her thumb and index finger, and pinched them, and began to pull in different directions. "What did you say?" she yelled. Oren and Cyrus watched them, trying desperately to suppress smiles and stifle their laughter. "Ow, please, my friend, stop pulling," Growl said, jerking his head around to try and get his ears away from her. She continued to pull and yank his ears until she decided to grab his lips and pull them around, showing his big teeth. Growl's next few words came out muffled. "Please, my friend, stop pulling," and to understand this, it's physically written, "Please, my friend, stop pulling," because he's not having.
Yeah.
Not until you take it back, she shrieked. "Tak what ack?" Growl said. "What you said about me being weak," she said, twisting his big lips in circles. "How can I when I can't speak?" Growl said, forcing part of the words to form. Gudrun stopped pulling and thought about what he had tried to say. She gave his lips one last yank, stretching them as far as they would go, and then released his lips, watching them slingshot back into their proper position. Growl sat back on her haunches and massaged his mouth with his soft paw pads. "Was that truly necessary?" Growl asked, tears threatening to form in his big bare eyes. "Yes," Gudrun snapped. He was about to say more, but stopped at a loud uproar behind her. Oren and Cyrus had doubled over in laughter, rolling about in the flowers. She marched over to them and grabbed their ears, forcing them to stand. The two boys winced in pain. "What are you laughing about?" she growled. Oren and Cyrus looked at each other hesitantly. "Nothing," Oren said shakily. "Yeah, nothing at all," Cyrus said, smiling as innocently as possible. Gudrun stared at them for a little while longer, her facial features hidden behind her cloak as always. She then released their ears and turned to face Rao. "One more word out of you," she said, pointing at him with a stiff finger, "and you won't have any ears left." It was true. She could be very frightening when she wanted to be. Oren leaned over to Cyrus. "Remind me to never cross her," he whispered. Cyrus nodded slightly, rubbing his earlobe. "All right," she yelled, causing everyone to jump. "Let's go. We have places to be and people to see and no time to waste. If you don't want to be knee-deep in mud when it rains, then hurry up." No one questioned her and ran quickly to catch up with her swiftly moving figure. The wind was still strong as ever. Oren looked at the sky. It was becoming bright and blue. It had been night in the desert, so why was it dawn here? "Why is it morning here when the desert is dark?" Cyrus said, stealing the words right out of Oren's mouth. "This continent is on the other side of the planet. The sun is rising into the sky here, while it has already set over there. Don't you know anything?" Gudrun scolded. Oren laughed at this. Cyrus, who seemed to know everything, had just been told he knew nothing. "Oren," she said, "you have no room to laugh, seeing as how you were wondering the same thing." Growl chuckled as Oren's face went pale. "I never said I didn't know," he protested. "Stupid boy, it's all in the eyes. The eyes are the window to the soul," she said, pulling on Oren's lower lid. Oren backed away from her, rubbing his eye, trying to see if she'd done any damage. He found the word stupid slightly offensive. "All right, stop being so slow and let's go," she hollered. Oren smiled. You had to love her enthusiasm, even if she was a little bossy. The grass bent underneath their feet and popped back up once they walked past. The flowers swayed freely, some of their blossoms just beginning to open, some closed tight against the wind, and others opened completely, allowing their sweet scents to be swirled in the cool gales. Oren looked to the ground. He watched the greenery twist, forming shadows, making patterns, and at times, faces. There were no faces he knew. Oren looked at the sky. The clouds drifted past. There was one cloud that caught Oren's attention. It seemed to be a person with wings. However, the wings were on their head, not on their back. Oren blinked and the cloud was gone. Someone shoved him from behind. "You're too slow," Gudrun said, circling in front of him. Oren looked at her silently. "You are very..." She pressed her thumb to her upper lip. "Interesting." Oren was surprised at this comment. "I'm interesting?" "Yes," she said, smiling. "Very." "What happened to hurrying up?" Growl yelled. Gudrun turned to face him. That's cheap, coming from a slow poke like you," she said. "At least I have the time to be slow," Growl shot back. "At least I have opposable thumbs," the woman countered. Growl silenced himself at this. "Is there a reason you're still arguing?" Cyrus asked. The woman snarled. Be quiet, soulless child. Cyrus closed his mouth, eyes wide. Soulless child, Growl said. Yes, it is a universally accepted fact that redheads have no soul. That, and there's the issue of his heritage, Gudra replied, her hands on her hips. Cyrus looked at her with extreme confusion, not understanding what heritage had to do with anything. Gudra looked at Oren, then grabbed his wrist and pulled him along. Her grip was strong, and after a few seconds it became too strong. Oren winced under the slight pain it caused him. The woman continued to drag him even after she had reached Growl and Cyrus. Finally, Oren wrenched his wrist from her iron grasp. She stopped and looked at him. Oren couldn't see if she was confused by his sudden action. Sorry, she said, for being too rough. But you know, it is your fault. If you were quicker, then I wouldn't have a need to drag you around. Ugh. Arrogant as always, refusing to take responsibility, Ralph said, shaking his head. Quiet. At least I understand the definition of the word responsibility, she snapped. You, on the other hand, refused to take it. Even then, you were constantly blaming others. Your arrogance and cowardice nearly led to the downfall of an entire civilization. I was young and weak. What did you expect of me? Ralph shot back. You disobeyed me. You ran away from what you had caused and cost many people their lives in the process. You are nothing more than a disgrace to your kind. You are lucky that I let you keep what you had then, because if you screw up again, I will rip it all away. Your father is twice the man you are. Even when he was young, he took care of his problems, and never, not once, did he disobey me. That was what kept him safe. That was what kept us all safe. I have never been wrong, but you are so selfish, the woman roared. Growl lowered his head before responding. At least I still have a people, unlike you, he said. The woman's temper flared high and bright, and the whole world seemed to grow cold. Take that back, she hissed. No, Rawl said, defiance burning in his eyes. That was the straw that broke the camel's back, and the woman wrapped her right hand around Rawl's large throat and squeezed. Rawl tried to move away, but the woman's grip tightened greatly. Oren and Cyrus's mouths dropped as they watched. The woman lifted Rawl's feet off the ground and held him in the air as if the bear were nothing more than a rag doll, light and fragile. I won't repeat myself, the woman said. Her voice had become deeper, cutting the air like a knife. Rawl choked out a response. I'm sorry. Gudra said nothing, but her hand let go of Rawl and the bear dropped swiftly to the floor. A few moments of Rawl coughing passed. I suppose that will do, she said. She turned from Rawl and walked away, continuing on her journey. Suddenly, she stopped and turned back round. You're too slow, Gudra shouted to the boys. You're too loud, Rawl hollered at her. So are you, she shouted back. Cyrus took a few heavy steps forward and straightened his back. Both of you, shut up, he yelled. Oren and Rawl looked at him in stunned silence. Gudra growled and walked up to him, and shoved a pale finger in his face. Her nails were pointed like claws, but not lethally long. Still, they looked sharp enough to rip the skin off your face, and they were painted black. It is a very foolish thing to do, to yell at me, she said, moving her finger back and forth. The only reason that bag of fleas gets away with it is because I owe him. Oren raised his head. What do you mean you owe him? Gudra looked at Oren, her eyes and nose still and always concealed beneath the dark fabric of her cloak. None of your business. She then turned and marched ahead of the others, not seeming to care if they followed her. Oren wondered why she seemed to get angry at every little thing. In truth, she had the appearance like an adult, but was quite childish. Oren sighed deeply. Let's go. Her voice was loud, and Oren was tempted to put his hands over his ears. Braille nudged Oren forward with his nose. Keep moving, or she'll really lose it, he said, stealing a glance at the tall, cloaked figure. Oren and the others began to follow the graceful, moving figure of the woman who had taken it into her own power to become the leader of the group. So, where are we going, exactly? Cyrus said. Gudra stopped. I am not going anywhere. The three of you should continue in this direction. Rawl knows what you're looking for. Just leave it to him. I have different business to attend to, so I am afraid I have to leave you here, she said, turning to face them. She looked at Rawl and smiled. Ral nodded in reply, and with that, the woman bolted in another direction. Ral stepped in front of the group. "Let's go," he said. "Why did she have to leave?" Oren said, almost sad. "Why, do you miss her already?" Ral said, smirking. Oren stamped his foot. "Not in the least." Oren knew what he had just said was a lie, but he would never admit that she was starting to grow on him. He was just surprised at her sudden departure. She didn't even pick a fight before she left, or allow anyone time to argue. "I'll ask again. Where are we going?" Cyrus said. Ral ignored him and continued walking. Oren quickly followed him, and Cyrus ran ahead so he could sit and rest as he waited. "She has her reasons, all of which are valid and important," Ral said, eyeing Oren. Oren looked up at Ral. "Do some of her reasons involve us?" he asked. Ral smiled. "You'd have to ask her about that." Oren looked at the ground as they walked, staring at the passing flowers. It seemed like time went by in an instant. Oren's mind had wandered about in his subconscious. Before he knew it, he had bumped into Cyrus. "Watch it," Cyrus said. "Why are we stopping?" Oren asked, bewildered. Ral walked forward and pressed a stone slab at his foot. It sank into the ground, and the mountain began to rumble. Oren looked at the ground in front of him and saw a large, circular stone door split in two and rumble open. It descended into what appeared to be the inside of the mountain. "How on earth? There is no way in all of creation this is possible," Oren yelled. "Surprising, I know, but the mountain is indeed hollow. Now follow me," Ral said, dragging the dazed Oren along. Glowing white and green stairs appeared, and Ral carefully scaled down them, with Oren behind him and Cyrus following Oren, happy as ever that he would be privileged to see such an amazing sight. The descent was a very long one. After walking down several flights of stairs, Ral, Oren, and Cyrus stepped onto a large circular platform. The platform was white, and as it began to move, green patterns lit up on its surface. It dropped rapidly, and then slowed down a great deal before stopping completely, hovering slightly above the ground. The trio stepped off, and Cyrus grasped Oren for support. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Light poured in through the top of the mountain. The walls were jagged and dark, colors of gray, black, and charcoal blending into one another. It also seemed that a large structure had once stood here. All that was left were ruins and shadows. Your questions answered, the truth was revealed. This is the place I was supposed to bring you to. Now follow me, please. We have little time, and I would prefer not to waste it, Ral said. Oren walked, and as he did, spun in a circle so that he could take in everything around him. The mountain's inside was immense. I've just noticed, but the inside is not to outside scale. Why is that? Cyrus asked.
It's alright, it's 1:51 in the morning in my time. I'm guessing it's like 3 or 4 in the morning yours?
It is 3:52.
Alright. We're actually a little over our usual time. We've done 3 hours so far. I wonder if we'll finish this next time.
Oh, we literally have, like, we're pretty much on the last chapter. We got, like,
alright.
A couple pages.
Yeah.
Let me see here.
I was kind of thinking, like, what I would do, like right now I'm just sort of catching up with weapon skills and magic skills, and next time we'll start in on the Desert of Kakara, which has my favorite, I think my absolute favorite music in this game.
There is a floor beneath us, but beneath this floor is another hollow space which expands to the ground level, Ral explained. So if the floor were to fall away, then we would be a lot further down, Oren asked. Yes, and we wouldn't be able to see the light from the lowest level. It would be total darkness and freezing cold, Ral said. Oren looked ahead and saw a vast structure. What is that? He said. Ral smiled at him. My friends, welcome to the Temple of Ruins. This is where we will find our vessel. Final chapter. Woman within the House of Rage. Snippet time.
Alright.
Somehow, I am not surprised. He failed. My student failed the first test before even 1 minute had passed. His soul froze in fear and his mind stiffened. All rational thoughts left him and he ran about in frantic patterns, hitting every wall, looking for an exit. I can't really blame him for feeling fear, but I have never had any student do so poorly. Each of them made it past the first trial. Only one made it through all the tests in one go. I do not imagine there will be anyone like him ever again. We returned home, and my dearest companion greeted me with unabashed joy, swinging me around in the air effortlessly. It made my stomach roll. What would I ever do without him? I folded my robe up and placed it in a special box, vowing to keep it there and never let it tarnish. Instead, I went out to the market and bought an old one. It was still black, covered my face, and had a flap of fabric to cover my mouth and nose if I found it necessary. Somehow, I feel better when no one can see who I really am. So what is the Temple of Runes? Cyrus asked. The Temple of Runes was originally the Temple of Tora, the god of rage. After his betrayal to Origin, his temple was destroyed. No one comes here anymore. Then why are we here? This is where we will perform the awakening. Oren was confused. He had never heard, in all his life, of anything called the awakening. Awakening of what? Cyrus asked. Growl chuckled. Of the vessel, of course. That is the whole reason we come here, to obtain the vessel that will be used to hold Origin's powers until she has claimed them all. Columns of stone and marble rose high into the air, disappearing into the darkness around them, the darkness of the mountain's insides. Walls stood in random places, and the entrance to the temple was halfway gone. The crest of Tora could still be seen. It was dark, but somehow it didn't seem threatening, even though it belonged to the god of rage, Origin's sworn enemy. Even so, Oren could feel an evil radiating from within the entrance of the ancient temple. The entrance archway loomed high over them, years of erosion visible on the worn-out surfaces. The light from the opening that had led them here slowly faded as they were embraced by the cold darkness within the ruined temple, and was altogether snuffed out when the opening atop the mountain closed with an echoing thud, shaking the insides. I can't see anything, Cyrus said. Give me a second, Growl said. He struck a wall with his claws, sparks dancing, and fire swirled around the room as a trench filled with oil lit up. The trenches extended up the walls and onto the ceiling. Small droplets of fire fell from the ceiling, turning into smoke when they hit the floor. The room was circular and small, but had a relatively high ceiling, with a large round door on either side. Columns held the ceiling up, and a snake carving decorated the floor. Growl walked across the rough, dusty floor slowly. This is where Tora's followers would gather to pray to him. Oren traced the carving as Growl spoke. The high priest would stand on the eye of the serpent and call up to Tora in song. The followers would sit on the serpent's body and tail. The counselors would kneel on the serpent's fangs, and the holy priestess would rest on the serpent's tongue. After Tora's betrayal, Origin's followers destroyed the temple, drove out his followers, and sent them to wander in the desert, where they eventually perished, Growl said. Pictures were etched onto the walls, faint glossy colors of red, blue, green, yellow, and white still visible in some places. These tell the story of how Origin and Tora became friends. Origin was weak, for she had been in a battle with another god. Tora, although of humble descent, carried her to the nearest village and stayed with her till she was healed. Origin was moved by his loyalty and offered him a place in her celestial home. He accepted, and they grew close to one another. Origin gave him knowledge, and he developed a system so that people could live more peacefully. Growl laughed, almost as if he couldn't stand what he was saying. If only that were true. Oren frowned. Is it not? Is this history false as well? Growl smiled mockingly and continued speaking as if Oren had never said anything. The tragedy of this story isn't carved into these surfaces. Tora became greedy for power. He strived to be stronger than Origin. He fought with her, and eventually he was able to deceive many of her followers. A massacre ensued. Millions of Excelsius were killed. The main village where they lived was burned to the ground. Origin became enraged and poured out an evil vengeance upon them, destroying them, burning them, wrenching the earth open to swallow them whole, drowning them in their own blood, and many more horrid, painful things. She obliterated them, and then engaged Tora in a final struggle. Sadness betrayed itself in Growl's face. Where she lost her powers, Oren said. Growl looked back at him in dismay. Yes, she fought for her people, for her world, and all those that she loved. And she lost, Cyrus said. No, Oren said. She didn't lose. It was a draw. Tora was sealed and she lost her powers. Neither lost nor won. There's still a battle to be fought. Oren traced the pictures lit by the small flames on the floor and the fire falling slowly from the ceiling. It was then that he came to a great realization. All these trials we've been through, they are only the beginning of what's going to happen. Even now, without her powers, she's calling all her forces together to strike the final blow, and the three of us are in the middle of it. We will be her fighters. Growl watched Oren with indifference. Yes, you are in the middle of it. Many others are part of this, all of whom have some role to play in this. Some are valuable and irreplaceable, while others are simply pawns. Pieces in a chess game that can be easily discarded, as they hold no significance unless they manage to reach the other side of the board. What does she want? Oren said, almost to himself. What does she want with us? Are we important, or are we one of those pawns that don't matter? Val laughed. You'll have to ask her. She is the only one who knows for sure. Where is she? Cyrus asked. I can't tell you that. I haven't the faintest idea. Ralph stood in front of the circular door. You two, open it. Braille glared at him. Oren glared at him. What's behind it? You'll see once you open it. I don't have opposable thumbs. Oren chuckled. You're right, you don't have opposable thumbs. He did his best to mimic Gudra's voice, who had previously railed on Rao for being, well, Rao. Oren and Cyrus grabbed one side and pulled with all their might. The door shook, friction rubbling in its frame, and slowly began to roll. It scraped against the stone floors and walls, turning until it hit another wall, and a metal slab shut over where it had gone. Behind this door was a steel wall, symbols etched onto it. They were in peak condition. There was no rust or chipping, which led to the group believing that the stone door had airlocked it against the elements, preserving it. Cyrus went forward to see if he could move the wall by pushing it, but was yanked back by Ralph. All at once, the floor lifted beneath them, and the metal wall in front of them began to turn, symbols flying by in blurs. Oren looked behind him and saw that the entrance was gone, now covered by the same wall they had just seen in front of them. He turned back around and saw that the metal wall was also gone and had been replaced by an open archway, allowing them to move forward. What just happened? Cyrus asked warily. Ralph smirked as much as a bear could. The floor of this room sits on a screw-like pole. Inside of the walls of this room is a separate wall, no ceiling, that revolves around the screw when the floor lifts off the ground. By effect, it opens closed doors and closes open ones. So basically, the room just rotated beneath our feet because some architect had the crazy idea of revolving rooms, Oren said, slightly impressed. Ralph stared at him for a moment before he spoke. As I was saying, he said, clearing his throat loudly. Basically, the room turned 180 degrees, so that the path in front of us could open while the path behind us closed. Oren thought it would be fun to incorporate it into the temple schematics at random, and let the builders figure it out on their own. Oren lifted an eyebrow. I'm going to assume that didn't end well. Ralph frowned slightly. Needless to say, the builders were working on this temple for 23 more years than they expected. Cyrus blinked slowly, trying to process the information. So, he said in a slow drawl, Origin was a bit of a trickster. Growl laughed loudly, his belly shaking. I suppose you could say that. He shook his furry head and began walking. Let's move on. The next and final room was immense. My god of fire, Cyrus said. The room was 50 feet across and 40 feet high. The walls were gold and the floor had blue-trimmed tiles made from silver. The ceiling was covered in elaborate paintings that seemed so real it was almost as if living creatures had flown into the paint and gotten stuck there, becoming a permanent decoration. Torches lined the walls and lit the fabulous detail and everything. Near the back wall was the largest blue crystal Oren and Cyrus had ever seen. It stood perfectly still, held at the top and bottom by large golden claws. The crystal's middle stretched out at least 15 feet across, meeting at sharp points at the top and bottom, and the edges of all the faces. It must have been 30 feet high, just 10 feet smaller than the room itself. What was even more impressive about this crystal, large and beautiful as it was the woman held inside of it. Chains were connected to her arms and legs, which stretched and twisted until they clasped onto the inner walls of the crystal. She was held upright, perfectly still. Her visage was not visible, as what appeared to be a helmet covered her face. It bulged at the back slightly, and Cyrus assumed that perhaps her hair was in there. A knee-length yet somewhat tattered white dress with short sleeves covered her body. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make her appear decent. She seems pretty, Cyrus said, his eyes wide. Right now, that's an understatement. A pity she's concealed so well, Growl snapped, obviously displeased with Cyrus's poor choice of adjectives. Cyrus jumped slightly and willed himself to become invisible, but to no avail. She seems beautiful, Oren whispered, enchanted by her appearance in its mysterious glory. Never in his life had he seen someone so unique, yet so seemingly simple. Growl smiled, pleased with Oren's description. That's much better. He sent a fierce glare at Cyrus, who was trying his very best to be a wallflower. Who is she? Oren asked, never taking his eyes off her. She is our vessel. I can't tell you who she is exactly, though. That's her job. But I can tell you how to get her out of that crystal, Growl said, a hint of sinister playfulness flashing through his big brown eyes. The bear turned and walked towards one of the many torches on the walls. He grabbed it with his mouth and began to tug against it, trying to release it from its current domain. It took a while, but eventually the metal clasp holding the torch in place bent open, allowing Growl to free the torch from its confines. The bear returned to his original spot and gave his head a quick jerk, sending the torch flying through the air and straight at the crystal, piercing the face directly in front of him. The crystal shimmered with an ominous blue light that grew and then faded. It shook, groaned, and began to turn slowly at first, but then it sped up greatly. However, the woman inside did not turn, nor did her chains. They seemed to be connected to a separate wall inside the crystal that was not affected by outside influence. Fire from the torch formed a dangerous ring around the crystal as it spun tremendously fast in a circle. Eventually, the wind snuffed the torch out, leaving a ring of smoke instead. The bottom and top of the crystal grinded against the golden claws, sparks flying up and out. It's rotating at a ridiculous rate, so much that your eyes can't really process it. And if you look closely enough, you'll see that it's actually slicing the wall behind it. Touch it and you'll lose an arm. Keep this in mind. That crystal is the only thing holding the roof up. When it goes, we're either out of here or we go along with it. And how do we break it open? Oren asked, perplexed. He knew the crystal was rotating and there was a ring of smoke surrounding it. The torch was leaving charcoal marks on the wall behind the crystal as it slammed against it. Yet every now and then, the crystal seemed to glitch, and he would see slight blurs of the torch being on a different side. Suddenly, Oren's feet slid from underneath him, and he was being dragged towards the crystal. Growl grabbed him and held him back. The rapid spinning had created a vortex, sucking in air and compressing it. Everyone ducked as the torch flew across the room and smashed into the wall. Centrifugal force, Growl huffed. This is going to be a problem. I don't like the idea of the roof falling on our heads, Cyrus muttered, wanting to leave. No choice. The room behind us spun back around and sealed the exit. It won't reopen until we grab her. Then and only then can we run, Growl said. However, as simple as he was making it sound, he was worried about whether or not the room would be able to revolve fast enough for them to escape. That's stupid, Cyrus grumbled, glaring at the metal wall behind him. It is what it is, Oren yelled. Let's get this done. Growl smiled, enjoying his sudden display of bravery. Yes, sir. Again, how do we open it? Cyrus said, annoyed with the fact that no one seemed to care about their own well-being. He was also worrying if that meant that he was selfish. It's glass. Break it, Growl said. Go ahead and try to surprise me. Oren unsheathed his sword, raised above his head, and even though he would have been beaten at home for treating a blade so poorly, threw it at the crystal. It planted itself firmly in the glass, just above where the torch had been, and became a blur of color as it revolved with the crystal. The glass began to crack until the fissures had covered the middle and upper part of the large rotating gem. It's not enough, Oren growled, wishing he had another sword. Cyrus, it's your turn, Growl said. Cyrus took out the two short swords he had bought back at the Shrine of Usher. He threw them with all his might, only to have one of them hit the crystal and ricochet back at him. When they connected with the surface, one of the swords broke into several pieces. Cyrus leapt out of the path of the shrapnel. The sword still intact, stuck fast into the wall behind where his head had originally been. I almost lost my face, Cyrus screamed in anger, panic rising in him. Calm down. Honestly, it's a giant rotating jewel. It's not meant to be easy, Growl said, sighing. Besides, it's just your face. It's not that bad. Cyrus stared at Growl with disbelief.
It's just his face. Ridiculous. It was his only face, the only face he'd get in the whole world. He'd die without his face. Swords shouldn't bounce off things, Cyrus said, fuming. Growl looked at Cyrus. 3 sides of that crystal are shielded by magic that mimics a karma. They return an attack to the user. The one side that does not have a shield is the side where Oren's sword, and formerly the torch, reside. You need to try to hit that face of the gem. It was easier said than done, no doubt. However, Cyrus wasn't a quitter, and he didn't like the idea of some lifeless piece of melted, tempered, colored sand getting the better of him. Cyrus went to his short sword and yanked it out of the wall, wiping gold flakes off it. He then walked back to where he had been, raising the short sword, and waited, watching the crystal closely. Oren's sword flashed by, a blur of blue and silver. Cyrus threw the short sword. When Oren's sword flew by again, Cyrus's weapon ripped through the crystal below the torch's former position. The crack connected with Oren's and extended up. They touched the bottom of the crystal and stopped, the very top still untouched. Why isn't it breaking? Cyrus yelled angrily. He really wanted to leave. It's still not enough, Oren growled. Growl, it is your turn. Do what you did to Tharazar. I'm not so sure. Just do it, Oren yelled, angered and impatient. Growl stared at Oren's eyes. As you wish. In the future, don't shout at me. You have no business giving me orders. Oren stared at Growl, a bit stunned at his choice of words. Growl's crest reappeared, and lightning blinded Oren and Cyrus. The symbols lit up brightly, flashing with fury. Vashire, Growl roared, his voice like 100 claps of thunder, echoing through the building and shaking it to its core. Electric bolts erupted from the ceiling and streaked along the floor, creating pillars of lightning until they connected with the crystal. They struck right through the middle in a magnificent surge. The gem lit up like a beacon, shaking and groaning, and then it burst into pieces. Blue shards flew out in all directions, and the ceiling began to shake violently. The woman fell to the ground, her chains breaking apart with the inner walls of the crystal. Oren's sword and Cyrus's short sword falling with her. She hit the floor with a loud thud, and Oren heard a sharp, metallic crack. Growl raced into the falling rubble and snatched her up. Oren ran alongside Growl, grabbed his sword, and put it in his sheath, and picked up Cyrus's short sword. They ran from the room with haste, watching the metal wall as it spun around to let them through. The second everyone passed through the opening, the wall began to turn back around to grant them another exit. The ceiling fell in and covered the doorway after they'd passed through it. The woman hung limply on Growl's back. The floor split open, swallowing the serpent in the center. Growl rushed towards the entrance, trying to avoid the ceiling crashing down all around them. Just as the archway was about to fully open in the wall, a large falling rock hit the ceiling and knocked the metal wall off its screw. The metal wall stopped, only granting a fourth of the width of the exit. Growl stared at it worriedly. Oren, Cyrus, and the woman would fit through, but he wasn't so sure about himself, being a big fat bear. Oren squeezed through and pulled Cyrus after him. He then pressed his hands against the walls and pushed with all his might, willing them to move. Growl and Oren heard them slide a few centimeters and then stop again. Oren gave another great heave, heard the wall slide a bit farther, and then it stopped. He tried to make the wall move, but this time it wouldn't budge at all. Oren looked at Growl with fear. Growl, he said, his voice catching. It's okay, Growl said. I'll just wait for a miracle. All at once, a stone wall to their left exploded, knocking the metal walls back on their screw, and the exit opened up fully. Growl stared at the archway silently, thinking about how much he loved coincidences, then raced out of the temple to avoid falling debris. The trio raced from the ruins, the large archway shaking wildly. It collapsed, breaking into larger chunks of rock and brick. Dust flew into the air, shrouding them. After a few minutes, the musky cloud cleared, and all that remained of the ruins was a large pile of rubble. Well, Oren coughed, that was fun. I'll say, Cyrus coughed, dirt coming out of his mouth in thick brown puffs. Growl, you okay? How's the girl? Oren asked. She's fine. A little dirty, but other than that, everything's fine. Growl set her on the ground and immediately noticed that the right side of the helmet covering her eye had broken off, presumably from the fall. Her skin was pale and lifeless. It's time for the awakening. Oren looked at Growl. The symbols reappeared as he chanted something. Lightning came down and struck her. Her body jolted up and then lay still again. She jolted again, and a spell circle glowed beneath her. After a while, it pulsed 3 times and faded.
Get up, Raoul said, closing his eyes in anguish. Please. She lay still as stone. Oren touched her face, cold as ice. Suddenly, her hand jerked up and latched onto Oren's wrist with an iron grip, pulling his hand away. Oren tried to free himself, but she tightened her hold on him till it began to hurt, until it started to feel like fire. Cyrus backed away, and Raoul inched forward. Slowly, as if moving for the first time after 1,000 years' sleep, she opened her beautiful, calm eye. It was an eye of red, which could call 1,000 men to fight or lull a restless child to sleep. It was an eye of power. Oren saw then something he had not ever known before. This was the eye of a demon, a slit pupil, cold and bloody, and it demanded war. Our vessel awakes, Raoul whispered. Now the real journey begins. He looked into the woman's face with earnest. Will you take us to Origin? But joy left, and the one was alone, and the one wept. From the rivers of her tears the stars were born. The stars bowed before the Queen of Joy. Under her, as an offering, their fire became life. To explain that, there is a snippet at the beginning and end of each book. And the snippet is the fable that people in this universe tell of how the universe came to be.
Alright.
So they're broken up into little pieces. And we finished the book. Woohoo!
So is she the character that is just so far above everybody?
Yes.
Sounds like she and Cyrus are gonna have some horns butting.
She greatly dislikes him. So much. so much.
And I think we might be totally caught up on weapon skills too.
Yeah.
So all that's left for me to do off-screen is magic training, and then we can move on to the Kakara Desert.
Woohoo!
And perhaps more discussion of this, of your upcoming second book.
Yes.
When will this be? Tomorrow, perhaps?
Sure. I'm off for the next 2 days.
Alright, excellent. So, this has been a very special episode of Secret of Mana, being able to have this long and this long excerpt from Tears of a Dragon Awakening by the author herself.
Hello.
So I'll put a link to the Google Play Books where you could purchase this. Perhaps give me a link where someone could buy the physical version, and I'll try and put that in the description as well. So thank you everyone for watching, and hopefully we'll see you next time.